you don't have
Yeah.
meaning in your life. You know,
I think
I saw a
so
video of you
I
just sleeping in bed.
so
Um,
I think this train of thought for like trying to understand religion and like not, you know, being averse to it was the realization that it was conservatism that is the problem
mm,
and not religion inherently.
Yes.
And so
mhm,
that to me was a huge like empathy breaking point where I was like, wow, okay, like there are a lot of people who are religious who don't want me to like lose my rights and be a
mhm,
property of my husband. But like I think that was the big thing is like, no, it's conservatism I don't like. It's not religion. And people can believe what they want. I wish I could believe some of that because it would make me feel better. But you know,
mhm.
Yeah.
do be like that.
I often, whenever
Yeah.
I'm talking to like very religious people, try not to do the old atheist Gremlo thing where I would try and like, no, like this is unprovable. Like you're just believing in fallacies because of the way you were brought up. Instead of doing that, trying to redirect them into a more liberation theology type direction. So instead of their religion reinforcing their conservative biases, bringing it into a more uh, collectivist mind view instead of saying like, no, you shouldn't believe this. Saying like, well, if you believe that, then you should believe that, you know, in the teachings of Jesus, you know, blessed are the poor, blah blah blah.
I mean, it
Yep.
matters the religion, right? Whether or not it's progressive or conservative. Like, for example, you can look at Catholicism versus Christianity. Christianity is inherently going to be conservative because it's not going to want change over time. But Catholicism progresses over time because you have someone that's on earth that's like a person that talks to God, so that you can know that like, oh, black people are cool now, or you know, that kind of stuff. And the same thing with Shia and Sunni Islam too. You can have Shia is the progressive, Sunni is the more conservative, like no changes allowed.
Yeah. And if you really want to break the brain of someone who like may be a Christian conservative in America, kind of a chud, just bringing up the stat that, you know, if you compare evangelical Christians in America to people who practice Islam in America, people who practice Islam are far more progressive. And that's just based on polling. I mean, that's it. It's not the faith, it's not the religious text, it's the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotal sample size of one, but one of my lab mates, the same one who's now fucking anti-mask, you know, he immigrated from Jordan, like the Middle Eastern country of Jordan. And, you know, he was like, oh, I didn't really know what the trans person was until I came to America. But, you know, okay, like if people are just being people, then all right, that's fine. Like it doesn't do anything to me. Like that was just literally his entire notion. Like, oh, this is a very like foreign thing to me, but like, all right, like I might have some issues with pronouns, and especially if the pronouns keep changing, and it might make it hard for me to keep up. But like, okay, cool. Compared to like all the Christians I've run into, it's like, you know, they want to put trans people on crosses like it's the Salem witch trials or something. Like the dichotomy, at least in my personal experience, fits that mold exactly, Gremlo.
Yeah. I do have a limited time. I wanted to watch this one video with you guys. I don't want to like try and rush through this part of the conversation because it is very interesting when we talk about radicalization. But if we want to watch this segment real quick and then we can talk about it before I let you guys get into the anti-science stuff.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly before you turn that on. Michael Brooks has a book out called Against the Web, which is about the IDW. I would show it, but it's packed up somewhere.
Yeah, I love Michael Brooks.
Fun read.
Gone too soon.
Gone too soon.
I have the video up. Just let me know when
I'm trying to pull up the actual like browser so I can show it to stream.
Muted. What channel is it in?
It's in both
either ministry or guest.
Yeah.
Okay. I said that twice before realizing that I was still muted, so that's cool.
Why don't you guys want to listen to
that's
me?
why no one's answering me. Okay, cool. Oh, being a streamer is hard.
It's very hard. All right, hang on. Everything is scuffed.
Nope, it's not gonna work. Okay. Right.
I think that's probably gonna have to do. And then if I full screen that, maybe it'll do this. All right, I'm good.
Okay, hang on. I'm promoting myself in my chat right now. I also linked everybody's profiles on Twitch in the chat so that everybody's getting their stuff. Hey, what's up, Mr. Canary? Mr. Canary in the chat actually is one of my oldest community members and a streamer. He was here in my my days when I was doing sociology class in the morning, streaming for 4 hours, and then going to work right after.
Oh wow, dang, dude.
Yeah.
That pog.
All right, we all good?
Should be.
Okay, so we should have just a second of music, and then it'll get into one of Michael Brooks's old panels that he did. Oh God, nope, that's not. It just skipped.
Man, Ben Burgess sure does look like Michael Brooks.
Weird for me, I had a boss named Michael Brooks, so every time someone says Michael Brooks, I'm like thinking of this old Mormon dude.
They're making of it is that science. Why we're not promoting racism or sexism, but we are very interested in some extremely antiquated ideas about scientific differences, quote unquote, right? So what you're seeing in these arguments, and I'm just going to bring in two other things because there's a lot to cover here, and I can kind of get lost in the weeds.
The gold chain
A
drip.
basic difference, I would say, between left and right is the difference between historicizing and naturalizing. If you're on the left, broadly speaking, you look at things and you say, what are the historical, material reasons why that is happening? If you're on the right, you say that is what it is. Now, paradoxically, this is actually a reason why right now there's a lot of conflict between people who are more socialistic and people who are more like woke, quote unquote. Because their moral dimension is better. Look, America is a racist society is correct. Acknowledging that truth versus denying that truth is a major difference, no question. However, if you read Adolph Reed, who's one of my intellectual heroes, I really hope everybody is reading him, he will tell you why racism and white supremacy is a multi-generational project in America that depends on economic conditions, that manifests in different geographies, that is inseparable for how we produce and do capitalism.
He's talking about
Actually,
CRT.
it might become separable, right?
Cancel him.
Whereas some people who have a woke discourse, it just is. It's the religious foundation of America. There's no difference between any different historical periods. It's just this moral block statement. Does that make sense? So some of these critiques can get really subtle, and that's actually what started to occur to me with the IDW and dealing with the right.
What was that?
No?
Oh,
No, not for me.
okay.
Because website that you think is the left, and what do you have? Seinfeld's actually problematic, and you suck, and shut the fuck up, and this is a problem, and that's a problem, and this is this, and that. And then Jordan Peterson comes along and goes, no, actually, you're great, and you should have a government-provided wife to massage you.
Okay, so we don't need to listen to Ben Burgess's breakdown of it, but
Yeah.
Michael's
Those are excellent points.
Michael drawing a line of delineation between
Oh, God.
those who have a material foundation in their worldview and those who essentialize these kind of conclusions that we come to when we have a materialist worldview. I think is very important whenever we're talking about people who are going down these radicalization pipelines, because if you're woke, and I hate that term, but you believe that America is a racist society, you're correct, but you don't have a foundational understanding as to what brings about that result. And that's where we get hyper corrective, over woke scoldy, language policey kind of approaches to these issues. But the same thing exists on the right, I think, that essentialization of society, that instead of it being America being a racist country from a woke perspective, from the reactionary perspective, it's an ideal society. It's the best society that ever existed. So the same proclivities that the woke and the reactionary IDW people have is exactly the same. They're approaching it strictly from a bias that they already have.
Here, I think my audio's messed up. Just 1 second.
Okay, I mean, you're... Yeah.
Pause, champ.
Right.
Pause, champ.
There we go. So, wait, Grandma, were you going to say something else before?
Oh, no, I was going to let that lead into a conversation.
Got it, okay. So, what I guess really struck me about what Michael Brooks had to say is the fact that, not only do I agree with it, but the fact that I see none of that in my training. That's not a thing that even comes remotely close to any sort of science that I do. No amount of training that I've had ever even breaches that ground.
Right.
I literally want to take STEM lords that I know, tie them to a chair, and make them watch what you just showed us. That
you
is
have the link now.
I have the link now. But that's such a good springboard into why a lot of the shit that they're going to get duped into believing, because it's more scientific or logically sound, isn't actually a really good worldview to be having, because it's just simply, no pun intended, but sort of capitalizing on people's proclivity for that kind of content.
Yeah. And it's like we brought up in the post show last week about praxeology, what Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman are big fans of. This rejection of empiricism, that people are rational actors and they engage in rational behavior. Well, we know that's not true, but the rejection of empiricism, despite any kind of evidence that would go counter to what you're saying, that capitalism is going to is the most efficient system, and that this is the end of history. Well, we know that's not the case. We know that there are wide disparities within this economic organization. But if you follow a praxeological lens, well, you already believe that this is perfect. That if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're going to be the one on top. So it's very difficult to break people from that. And that essentialization is the hardest thing, getting people to have a materialist understanding, a historical understanding. That's why people were so hardline against CRT, because they were taught, and their parents were taught, and their grandparents were taught this framework of history. And saying, hey, there is a wider scope. I talk about people viewing history through a keyhole, where there's so much more. There's a whole other room they're looking into, but they don't realize it because they're just looking through this tunnel vision. If we can just get people to understand that there's more than what we were told growing up in the public education in America, then so many more avenues are opened up for actually productive conversations.
Yeah, I think I took away other specific portions of what he said, where there's this huge issue of where again, just to use the word, because that's we've got woke, kind of wokeism, or political correctness, or bourgeois liberal society politeness, whatever. That's a ground that, when built, is very, very frail and will tumble down. Most likely in kind of a rightward direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question.
Go ahead.
So, I guess, okay, where my understanding kind of falls apart on like PC stuff. I always assumed PC meant like you weren't using slurs or like, you know, the F slur or the N slur or shit like that. Like what am I missing? Like what's beyond that goes into being PC? Because I always called myself PC because I thought that that's all it fucking was.
I think the best description of it is basically take the golden rule where it's like treat others how you want to be treated, and exactly reverse that. And they got it exactly wrong where you want to treat people how they want to be treated. So rather like putting them first and saying things and putting things in a way that is not offensive to that other person.
Right. That's what I try to do. But I guess what I'm wondering is when does that turn into a bad thing?
Sure. So I think the extent to which it becomes a quote unquote like bad thing is sort of the woke scold. That's kind of the term that has been used interchangeably with SJW, and I think people in the more liberal camps of thought have been trying to reclaim the word SJW from that like 2016 Gamergate era politics. But basically when the desire to like be kind and respectful to other people sort of becomes this internalized identity, and people really hyper focus on it and make it very like central to literally everything that they ever do. Like they turn into, oh my gosh, this thing you said on Twitter could be interpreted as, discriminatory against this person, when there's like no valid claim to that whatsoever. Like kind of that woke scolding, always hyper focused and obsessed with it kind of deal. That is what ultimately foments the reaction, the reactionaries sort of in response to that, where, you can't tell me to use different pronouns, you fucking libtard. I'm going to go shoot a trans person because you wanted me to use a pronoun.
That's where I was confused, was like, that's all I've ever known as PC is like using people's preferred pronouns, not calling people slurs, like not using gay as a bad thing, that kind of thing. So I guess I didn't.
All good stuff.
Good stuff.
All good stuff, of course.
I thought PC was just like this term that conservatives made up to shit on us for not wanting to hurt people's feelings. So
well, that's part of it, isn't it? Because the woke or wokeism that you kind of hear in common parlance on the right now, it's undefinable. It's basically whatever they don't like. That's woke. That's CRT. That's Marxism.
Well, I would actually. I would disagree, and I would say that there are. So the rationale of political correctness is basically inclusion. So the idea is we don't want to kind of single people out in ways that will make them feel unwelcome and unable to like participate in what's going on. So we don't want people who are gay or have disabilities or trans or whatever, anything from a different place to feel super otherized and feel like they're not treated like people and feel like they can't participate. The issue is that political correctness can itself become a tool of otherizing. So, for instance,
when it's devoid of empathy.
Oh, okay.
Sure, when it's devoid of empathy, when it becomes extremely commercialized, when, as you said, it can become an identity, but it can be more specific than that. So one example could be when you add in kind of like the class and cultural dimension. So there's an issue that there's like a real. So I'm like a liberal elite for sure culturally. Like I get the latest news and the latest memes and the latest culture, and I'm hip, and we had like boba in my area before the Midwest, and I'm plugged in. I know what's going on. I would never mistake Korean food for Japanese food. I'm not, whatever, right? But there's a big issue that people who aren't clued into what is now kind of the latest level of understanding to be able to demonstrate that you're like one of the good guys. You now become excluded. So somebody who's like a redneck or whatever, or somebody who's like just from like, I don't know, Midwest or this is right.
Area.
I'm like showing my coastal elite status here, right? I can't think of places that aren't big cities.
Like anywhere in Kansas.
Anywhere in Kansas, right? So just people who just haven't run into this stuff just constantly in their daily life, and it isn't just a secondhand thing that it's not even just a question of like accept, but just like understand or know what's going on. They speak and they're immediately recognized as like one of the bad ones now, and now they're excluded. And now somebody who is like a totally fine person, but like doesn't know that you're not supposed to in polite society, which can also mean more kind of like upper class society. You shouldn't use these kind of words. They're now excluded. And so this tool of inclusion becomes one of exclusion, both culturally, economically as well. And there's ways it can ultimately otherize other groups of people. That, you know, certain types of people from different countries or different skin colors or whatever have to have had certain experiences or have to behave a certain way.
You end up generalizing people in.
Right.
I see where the divide is now. I think. Yeah, I never thought of it as being like an othering tool.
Yeah, there's like propaganda that the right will often use when they talk about like wokeism or whatever it is, where the left are the real racists because they're solely focusing on identity politics and they're trying to, you know, it's all fallacious in what they say and it's all like nonsense in like what they think people who are into CRT are trying to do. Where they say they're trying to segregate the population and by defining people within rigid like class or race structures.
I don't see color, brother.
Exactly. But the kind of overcorrective, I call them rad libs. I don't call them woke or anything. I call them like rad lib because they're hyper overcorrective and they like don't have any like foundational worldview. It's just like once you're understanding that like racism is a thing and that you know, trans people are valid, then the second someone steps outside of that and you kind of attack them without understanding that they too were once like you were before, that's whenever we start to lose people. That lack of empathy is what I'm talking about, where they don't understand like, hey, you're not, you know, as left today as you were yesterday, so kind of keep that in mind. I lost my thought just now, so anyone want to pick that up for me?
There it goes.
Yep, there it goes. That's what we were talking about last week.
I guess I've just heard PC in such a derogatory manner. Like I was trying to reclaim it because I take pride in the fact that I try not to hurt people's feelings with my words, but it's not like a core central part of my personality. I think the only reason it's so important to me is because I live in a very conservative area and people here don't understand the weight behind like saying, oh, that's gay. Like they just don't get it. And I guess that's why it's like such an integral part of me, because it's not normal where I'm from. So I only get like the abrasive, like if I like mention maybe they shouldn't like give them shit for using a word like jokingly and then they like get really offended about it. Like I don't even attack them or anything. I just make it lighthearted. But yeah, I'm very used to being attacked for bringing that up.
And I think that context is kind of exactly the thing that makes a difference. So if you're in like a really conservative area and there's people who are constantly like saying the T-slur or like using gay as like this is a bad thing or whatever, being like, hey, you know, think about if you like were gay and people were constantly saying this, like that would kind of make you feel like not great, right? You know, as like a way to kind of introduce them to thinking about that. That's like a really awesome, wonderful thing to do. But in other contexts, so in kind of like a certainly like more like economically well off and kind of more like culturally dominant like thing in America, somebody who does use gay as like you know, referring to a bad thing or just using the word gay, whatever, they might be extremely marginalized and they might not understand like what the hell is going on, and they just know that like they're poor and people are saying that just like the way they're speaking, that doesn't hurt anybody around them and never has in terms of their life experience.
They haven't perceived it.
Suddenly they're like,
yeah,
sure. I mean, it could definitely be mixed. There's some things that there's some things that I think are generalized, and I don't know if I can think of one off the top of my head, but there are things that are generalized to be more like not okay than they probably are. Like I've literally heard people say like, oh, you shouldn't call that like a blackboard, you should call it a chalkboard, you should call it a whiteboard, you should call it a dry erase board. Like these things can get pretty extreme, right? Where there's people just like looking for something to push this further, right?
Those
That
are the
can, it
people
can
I
get
call
pretty
rad
silly.
libs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't have to do that.
Yeah, but there's definitely things where it's like, the way people joke with their friends, like in kind of normal life, is pretty different than what's culturally depicted, maybe like in Hollywood or something, right? And Hollywood is kind of a culturally dominant force. That's definitely like a much more upper crust thing. And so people can be culturally marginalized even if they're white, right? Like, oh, crazy idea, right? That can totally happen. And we shouldn't assume that just because some people are marginalized in some contexts, that other people aren't marginalized in other contexts in other ways.
Right. Folks, promises made, promises kept. I have to dip out. I have another panel that I'm going to go to.
Double features,
I see how it is. Okay.
I know.
He's a
See if they
big fan of
appreciate
a
you the
big
way we
deal.
do.
It's fine.
No, it's no big deal. Thank you guys for letting me rant about something that I have rotted my brain with over the last 8 years. I have some other links for you guys if you want me to. I think they're just in that queue. I don't know if you guys have control over skipping to the next video, but there's some other stuff in there that I put in that's pretty interesting. I think another one is another Michael Brooks segment when he talked to David Dole as he was publishing his book. So yeah, I'm gonna dip out. You guys have a good one, and somebody's getting a raid after this.
All right, thank you for stopping by, Grumlow. Much appreciated. We might save those videos for another one. So good luck on the panel.
Okay. Yeah. All right, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Peace.
Yep.
Yeah, have a good time.
See ya. All right, so let me I want to actually expand on something
Now that
Socrates.
he's gone, finally.
Yeah, what about that Gremlin motherfucker? He just
What a
like, wouldn't
fucking
stop
great
talking.
person. God.
Isn't water
They're
so
so
cool?
fucking red.
Don't you guys love bathing in water? Like, isn't that so? Like Gremlin's joke. Never mind. It's okay. It's okay. You'll get it. It's all right. No, it's a cool. No, it's cool.
Don't you
It's
love
gotta-
bathing in water? Excuse me?
Don't you? Yeah, you have to be
No, I-
born before 9/11 in order to get that joke. It's like,
I bathe in Diet Dr. Pepper. I was born before 9/11. The hell is that supposed to mean?
Yeah, I have no idea what that means.
Me either. I'm 25, bro. I'm not some 19 random hussy, all right?
Here, so I wanted to touch on something Socrates said because I think it actually kind of brings us back to sort of this discussion back within our microcosm of science. I actually really liked how you were able to pretty accurately identify yourself as like the prototypical like liberal coastal elite type. Like, you know, you have craft beer and good food and, you know, stuff like that.
I don't know about that, but
Well, I mean, probably more
There's
than, you know,
access somewhere.
exactly. More than a metal worker in Pennsylvania, you know, surely would have.
Mhm.
But I think it speaks to something that I think a lot of us do understand, but some of us don't, in that, like, we do in a lot of ways fit that mold. Like, people will perceive us as the, you know, bourgeoisie elite, especially from a conservative way of thinking, right? We're these, you know, fancy white collar workers in lab coats who do science shit that's all really complicated and full of SAT words. But, you know, I think there's something to be said for, like, if especially if we're having political conversations within our domain, to sort of try and like establish common ground that kind of goes beyond just like what we do as liberal elites. Like, I guess where I'm coming from is people within science who think in conservative ways or who are just overt conservatives, like they don't really identify with that like liberal elite component. So it doesn't really feel like if we're talking to our colleagues or if we're, you know, trying to stop them from like reciting Jordan Peterson shit or Ben Shapiro, like it's not going to be as easy as just like, well, yeah, and like you're a scientist, like you should know that, you know, they're doing ABC fallacy or, you know, that's false because of this data. Yeah, it's never that easy. Like that's kind of where I'm going with this. It to maybe open up a discussion about like your I don't know if this is your PI, Amber, or the dude who's making you take all the fucking pictures. I don't know if it's a combination of the two, but like we can use them, as like a case study, right? Like conservatives in Utah in science. My former roommate who was an overt white supremacist in my fucking program, like I think he was probably not redeemable, but like these people exist.
The hard thing about like Mormon culture and Utah in general is like a lot of these things are not brought to the surface. So like you can see the discomfort on their face when you bring up like social problems or like, bring up a problem you have with a word they use or something. You can see the discomfort, but like the culture here is like so non-confrontational that they will never bring it up to your face. They'll talk about it with somebody else, which is nice because I don't have to deal with it. But like at the same time, sweep it under the rug. It's like I have experiences with it, but it's very nuanced because it's not an overt like, I was listening to Ben Shapiro the other day. Like I heard some guy say something about Alex Jones, but he's not from Utah, so it's not like as. But anyone from Utah is very like sweep it under the rug, keep smiling, and change the subject as soon as possible kind of thing.
And then if you say something or if you confront somebody, now they'll never bring it up in front of you ever again.
Exactly.
And you'll never know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why my boss has, not my PI, but his research associate who does all the lab work with me, he's sworn off politics at work because, he's from this culture and he knows that there are people who will not agree with him, as there always is with politics. And so he just doesn't want that confrontation. He doesn't want to have to change the subject. He doesn't want to have to do that. So he just swore it off. And he told me like he'll talk about religion with certain people at work, as in other Christians and LDS people. And so.
So like I kind of agree with Socrates back when he said like we should be having more of these discussions. I guess not like in a confrontational way, but not shying away from it rather than just kind of letting it fester. I guess like not directing that at you, Amber.
No. But that's the thing is like I feel like he's been burned in the past, like talking about these things with someone else, and so like the fact that I bring it up or I ask his opinion about something, like I don't do it anymore. But when I first started. If I like asked his opinion about something, I feel like it's just a knee-jerk response, and he didn't know me that well, so he didn't like understand where I was coming from with my questioning. So I just seemed like another militant atheist, even though I was phrasing it, kindly and carefully. It still is like, oh, she's questioning me on something, and she's a bad faith actor, and I'm not gonna stand for this kind of thing. So.
Yeah,
which is also bad, but
I mean, it's tough. Like for the lab, like my ultimate goal whenever I'm like working as a scientist in a professional manner, like I want people to I want to be approachable to people. So I want people to be able to come up to me, ask me questions like, is this sodium hypochlorite or sodium hypochlorate? Like during the reaction, like the worst thing that could happen is that I'm so off-putting that they don't come to me when when that stuff matters. I think that like in general, like we should be talking about things more as Americans. We say like, oh, religion and politics are the two things that you can't talk about, but I wish people did talk about it more. But I also understand that people, are there at work. They're forced to be there, and to kind of like be badgered and to have them to feel personally attacked, even though if you're not personally attacking them, it can be. I don't feel like that's fair. So I think that there's kind of like a line that I at least like you walk where like I'll ask questions. I won't like necessarily give like my takes or anything, but I'll want to hear what they have to say about an issue, and so they're doing the majority of the talking so that they feel more comfortable.
That's exactly how I approach it. So I'll give some context. So I have a friend who's Mormon, and she loves the Book of Mormon musical, the Broadway musical.
It's a great musical.
It's fantastic.
It's hilarious.
I've seen it live.
And being from Utah, I have too. Being from Utah, that musical is like even fucking funnier. And there are Mormons who love that musical. Like my friend, she loves the Book of Mormon. She thinks it's so funny because she can take it, but one of my first couple days of working there, I asked my boss if he enjoyed the Book of Mormon musical, and of course, like, he's like, no, I find it very offensive, and I'm like, oh, like, I'm so sorry, like, but like, just questions like that, like, he just shut down immediately, and I didn't feel comfortable, like, ever talking to him about anything like that ever again. But yeah, it's always like questions, like very open-minded, open-ended questions. It's never like, so why the fuck do you believe in God? Why? It's never like that. But I think that's what he assumes will happen, and so he's just, not open to the possibility. But
yeah, I think in my experience, it takes it typically takes a lot to overcome that presumption. So like, usually if I'm going to talk to somebody, so pretty much if I'm not talking to somebody who's behind a table that has like changed my mind written on it, I assume that they're going to be like that level of like flighty about it and not want to debate bro it, be like, more of a normie, and they're just like talking about a thing, and they haven't like spent like hours researching it, thinking about it, and like debating it, and all of this. Like the first like 3 sets of things that I'll say to them will just be to like do my best to try to convince them that I'm not gonna try to change their mind. Yeah, to assuage those kind of fears.
And I've said that to him before. I was like, I'm probably the best person to talk about politics because I fucking hate all of it. So, well, not literally, but like, in the normie conservative state perspective, I hate Democrats and I hate Republicans. They're all one party to me. So I feel like I'm a safe person to talk about it with. But he's just so closed off to it. But
yeah.
That's another thing, though. He, like, at work, a lot of people consider themselves like apolitical, and like we were talking about earlier, like apolitical can be, but I don't know if he's actually apolitical or if it's just his work like persona.
I mean, that kind of speaks to the need to, like, even if it's impossible or it doesn't seem possible, like, try to breach that threshold, right? Especially because I don't know how recently this was, but we kind of try and like push back on this notion that scientists are just these apolitical automatons that plug things into computers and do PCRs and shit. Like, this I think goes back to a lot of what we've done in the philosophy of science panel. Scientists are humans. We are humans doing things in a very human context in the times in which we're doing it. And we kind of have to account for all of that. But I think the question is, like, how do we breach that topic with people, especially if they're either apolitical or, in your case, Amber, with some of the people that you deal with, like, just overtly like not wanting to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
And the funny thing is when I first started, he's like, yeah, I love like when I have a coworker that I can talk about things besides work with. But now he's like been so backed into this corner out of like distaste or fear of me when we haven't even talked about anything of substance, that like all we can talk about at work now is work and Avatar: The Last Airbender, because that's all we have in common.
Dude,
I'm not even kidding.
Avatar's good, but what the fuck? That's so boring.
Dude.
Oh, Gremlo's coming back.
That digital droplet PCR though, woo! That PCR tech, you're just like, woo!
I cannot. Oh my god, the amount of times he's shown me a YouTube video for a fucking machine.
Sick. Touchscreen, dude. There's a fucking touchscreen. You have a USB right into it. You just go right. You don't even have to have a computer. It's really nice.
Amber, you got to double down. Take the Western blotting machines that I sent you and just show him videos of every single variant. Just you got to out-weird the guy.
I can't. The thing is, like, with this culture and this state, is I can't tell if he likes me or not. Like, I can't tell if he's just weird and like enjoys my company and is just weird about certain things, or if he fucking despises me and just like bottles it all up. And I've already got really bad imposter syndrome, so it's like,
welcome to social anxiety. So homozygote, I would actually very much disagree with what you suggested as an approach. So I think, yes, scientists should be more political and should be more kind of out and about, but I think a critical piece of that is the way that we do that. I think owning. So, like, here's my research. It's important that people understand this thing about it. Is kind of the way that I think that we should be approaching it. But saying like it's important that people like accept this or believe this is, I think, is kind of an angle that is not necessarily the greatest, because that's already people's issue with science and scientists, is that it's like telling them what to believe. I think that just trying to put out information that can get people to understand it. So, like, for example,
I've been saying this about the vaccines for 2 years now. Like, if we put out more information and tried to like actually educate people on how they work and where they came from and why they're not this brand new sparkly thing,
how they're tested.
Exactly. I think if we put out more education like that instead of, I mean, that's what Marcus and I and Greg, I'm sure, like try to do, is like give people the information, but it would be nice if it was like, you know, mass publicized and put out in mass so that people could like see it that aren't on Twitch or YouTube or whatever.
But isn't that political though? I mean, like politics is just humans interacting with one another. So I don't think that science can be apolitical at all.
I don't know, because I would say that politics is specifically about negotiating those kind of like power differentials. And I would say that this is somewhat of a different situation, because this is about trying to give tools to people, tools and information to people who don't have them. So,
shouldn't
like,
even be political in the first place.
Yeah,
it was politicized.
It's been politicized specifically by some very bad people when it comes to climate science or a lot of COVID stuff. For sure. But like an example from my own experiences, like I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or something, like a whole lot of Jehovah's Witnesses just like cropped up around my area. So I would just run into them.
My entire fucking life.
Yeah, sorry.
Mormons.
But they would just be there with those carts at like every train station, whatever, everything. I would just like run into them, and I would just start like talking to them about the Bible, talk to them about this, and like there were people that I talked to that were like, okay, we don't believe in evolution. There were people who didn't believe in the Big Bang. There were people who like it was super mixed. But my thought process going in, because I spent hours and hours talking to people. I went to like a Kingdom Hall to go to like do Bible study with them. My thought process with this was always just like, okay, I don't care whether you believe this or not, but I want you to be able to speak about this, and like I want you to understand what evolution is, and you could try to help educate me on what the Bible is, or what this perspective on the Bible is. I want to be able to understand your belief system. Cool, that's great. I want to not be ignorant, and I want you to not be ignorant. And I feel like back in like the 90s or 2000s, like when I was growing up, everybody would call everybody ignorant all the time, and you know, maybe it wasn't the nicest way to to talk about things, but replacing calling somebody ignorant with calling somebody like racist or extremist or lots of different things, even if those are like also accurate, it is a really different perspective. Because somebody who's racist, there's not like an obvious solution to that. Or the solution that some people will talk about sometimes is like they shouldn't have a voice or something, right? Mm-hmm. But if somebody's ignorant, the solution to that is really, really straightforward, which is like, well, you need to like be educated. You need some information, and then you'll stop being ignorant. So there's like a very clear path to ameliorating that categorization of people, rather than like writing people off as deplorable or whatever. Irredeemable. What'd you say about your roommate?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to like de-radicalize an entire like Nazi just by virtue of cohabitation like that. That was not a good situation, to say the least.
Just you should just play like MLK speeches like while he's asleep. Just.
Oh, I think my overt existence was enough. Just putting it that way. I think I was doing that just by existing. But no, I think like where I was going with the conversation was less of a like science lay people type deal, and more like within science, like between scientists, because that's I think why I kept bringing up like Amber's colleagues, simply because like they believe a lot of the same things that like radicalized conservatives do, but they have this weird, almost paradoxical position in terms of what they do as far as employment. Like, maybe I'll go within my experience. I think when I was getting my undergrad / master's, our lab tech, I think actually, and probably now, is an anti-vaxxer and was a giant like believer in homeopathy and stuff like that. And of course, it came from a place of tragedy because her dad died very early of pancreatic cancer at like 42. But all that to say, like, these people exist, and I think that's kind of maybe where I can pose a little bit of the question back to you, Socrates, or Amber, Greg, like, how do we talk to the people in our break rooms, water coolers, laboratories, if they hold these beliefs? Because it feels like you can't treat a conservative in science the way you treat a conservative outside of science. Like, it almost feels like you need different tactics. But that's kind of where like I guess just looking for insight. Like, how should we go about doing that?
I would say just very, very simply, if they don't want to talk about it, don't talk about it, right? I mean, there's a certain point where if somebody has some cognitive dissonance, if they want help resolving that, especially if they resolve it in the like better direction,
or if they bring it up,
that's great.
Free game, but like. That's why I haven't talked about it with my coworker, because he's so obviously uncomfortable with it. I don't want to like make him uncomfortable. But
I would just respect that, right?
Yeah.
If it's like Francis Collins and he's like believes in God and he's like a born again Christian, but he's also seems like he's doing a good job running the NIH. It's not important to me necessarily to resolve for like that to be resolved. Like, people have cognitive dissonances. It's probably. Could bring on like a psychologist or something who could probably talk about this, but that's probably like an important thing for people to be able to have. It's critical for people to have that. Even, I mean, I imagine this is like a huge thing like in Utah, of like people who are there's probably people who are like anti-gay but have like gay like kids or cousins or whatever, and they're super nice to them.
My brother's husband's family.
Yeah. And it's like,
they're amazing people.
Yeah.
They're Mormon, which is inherently, anti-LGBT, but they like support their son.
Yeah. And that's great. Like, I wouldn't want to bring that discrepancy and antagonism to the head, because what if they resolve it in the direction of like, oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We shouldn't be like nice to our kid anymore. Like, what if they resolve it going the other direction? Like, I'm not saying it's perfect. It's usually better probably if people have like beliefs that conform with doing good things. But if they're doing good things, then that's kind of my position. And this is like what it comes to in this kind of broader situation where it's like, if people are from a culture that and kind of talks and does a thing a certain way, whether that's like from another country or whether that's a different part of the country, if they're treating other people well, and obviously there's kind of bigger political things that can be more complicated, but overall I do think that and this can come back to political correctness and wokeness. There can be kind of pushing the limits of basic kind of like privacy and dignity, and giving people like the ability to be who they are, even if that isn't really perfect, but like to be like, okay, well, you've got to treat other people a certain way. If people say don't call them a T-slur, like, don't. But but that doesn't, say it in private or whatever. I don't know.
But that's what a lot of people feel like. That's why they feel like their liberty and freedom is being infringed upon.
Yeah,
now they're being
because to some degree it is
a certain way. Yeah. I agree.
There's a huge cultural push to demonize that kind of like themselves, not just actions, but beliefs, beliefs and feelings, and just kind of normal speech. Yeah.
So I think where I'm coming from with this, like, maybe I'm not coming from it from a more like individualist perspective, but I think it comes from more of like, I guess, worries about the institution. You know, if there are people who fundamentally hold anti-science beliefs, it almost feels like it's a detriment to the institution to sort of just let it fester, because at the rate it's going, you know, you still have people with degrees who wind up fundamentally opposing the very opposition that gave them that degree and working diligently to try and undermine it at every turn. So that to me almost like necessitates bringing it up, but not in like a debate lord way, like not like, you know, finding Amber's coworkers and be like, hey, we need to talk about that, you know, Russell Brand video you watched, like not like that. But you know, I think eventually at some
Count for your
point,
browser history.
yeah, like honestly, it doesn't need to be a, you know, private investigator type deal. Like, hey, I saw you watch Jordan Peterson 3 days ago. We need to talk about it. Like,
I mean, we had an entire 2-hour conversation, and I like, you know, I kind of shallowly told him like I'm a very empathetic person, so all my political views stem from that. Like, I think healthcare is a right, and food and shelter, and he was like, yeah, I absolutely think that we should have nationalized healthcare by now. And so, like,
That's awesome.
I think when you open up conversations like that, you find out people don't fit the mold as much as you think they do. But like, I definitely, like, once he said that, I was like, okay, let's investigate this a little bit. Like, what do you mean? Like, asking questions, presenting my stances on stuff. So I didn't just like let him bring up Russell Brand, let it go. And that's why the other coworker left, because he was like, oh, fuck, politics. Peace out.
Yeah, I mean, this
But
is
that's
why
what
I'm
I
so
mean.
against like
Go ahead.
political labels, because it's just as soon as someone thinks that they are something, now they're going to be thinking about like what does this say? What is the GOP take on this? And it's like, well, we know what
Exactly.
you believe, like, and
So
Yeah.
it's a lot different a lot of times.
my dad is like, I love him to death, but he loves his guns. And like that love of his guns has pushed him farther to the right because of it. Because he wants his Second Amendment rights, but like that has kind of like made him, you know, question CRT and stuff like that. And so
Yeah.
I think that's
because
also
there's a
important,
clear
too.
political divide, but there's so many other ways to approach this. And this is probably what I spend like a ton of my time thinking about, is like, what's another way to approach this thing that kind of like goes around the normal like courses that things usually flow through. So like it could be like, okay, well, you think that like it's really critical for people to be responsible with their gun use, and people need to be like well trained and all this. Like, yeah, okay. It's like, okay, well, maybe, you know, it's important to have some kind of legislation to make sure that like only people who are actually well trained or are competent or are going to be safe like should have access to this. Like, we don't want like people who have like violent history or, you know, things like this to think it's like, okay, that makes sense. Like, I'm not saying it would necessarily go like that, but there's so many ways to approach all these issues that don't trigger that kind of like jumping into the groupthink. Like, I think of it kind of like people have like hard and soft lines. So people have like their own kind of ways that they think about things and where they actually stand on things. But then if you trigger a certain response that becomes like an us versus them, and there's clear like party divides, suddenly everything will shift. And they'll start defending things that they wouldn't otherwise defend or aren't otherwise for, but now their whole system is under attack, and they'll defend all of this stuff, and they won't budge on anything. And so it's like, I don't know, it's like not stepping on landmines or something like this.
Yeah.
It's like playing Minesweeper with these kind of political conversations.
Absolutely.
It's really difficult, but it's critical to be so careful about that, because it's so harmful to reinforce, oh yeah, you are part of this group, you are a conservative, you are a Republican, you know, you are even like a Nazi or something, somebody who's like young, who stumbled onto something on the internet and now starts spouting some Nazi, you know, talking points. If you treat them as like, oh, hey, you seem kind of lost. How did you end up in this area? Can I, like, you know, help guide you to somewhere nicer? Is going to have a really different response than, like, you're a fucking Nazi. You need to stop being a Nazi, or I'm going to stop talking to you. Like, that's...
and like, as much as I love Hassan's takes, like, his approach in that regard, Like, I understand the frustration and the anger, but
not
like
the
that's
best.
my biggest gripe with him is that he approaches everyone as if they are a dumb chud out to like, stun lock him. So
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
why he
especially
fucks all
with
their moms.
Nazi flags, man. I mean, if you look at a lot of Republican rallies right now, there's a lot of like people flying the Nazi flag ironically, right? And that's the kind of the danger. And this is the
now, yeah.
radicalization that happens where it's like they're okay with it, and then it's like and then it's like, where do you draw the line? Now you see a Nazi flag being flown to own the libs, and then now it's like not being flown ironically, and these guys are starting to talk about all white ethno states, and now you're like, well, shit. Now we're really like down a creek. But at the same time, like a lot of the people that are flying those Nazi flags don't have Nazi beliefs. They're not actually wanting to like necessarily genocide, like all minorities in this country, but they just are doing it because it just feels, like that this is something that I'm not supposed to be able to do, and I'm doing it, and now I'm making you mad, and that's what it's trolling. They're just trolling.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's how it was with my former roommate. It wasn't like a, look at my swastikas and how much I love Hitler. Like, it was more of a, like, slowly creeping in, like, racist talking points, and then a bunch of racist impressions, and then suddenly, like, it just got, like, too much to just tolerate. It got really cringy, so I was just like, all right, dude, like, sit down. Like, what do you actually believe? Like, this is kind of getting weird.
Exactly.
And it just unpacked so much that I didn't even realize was there. It was like, oh yeah, I totally love white Christian ethno states. That's how I've been raised. I went to private Christian school, and that's what they taught me. Therefore, that's good. And I was just kind of taken aback. Like, wait, like, you're becoming a scientist, but you also want to make a white Christian ethno state. Like, how are these two things reconcilable in any way? And I never really like got a satisfying answer to that idea. That
Hitler
question.
had lots of scientists.
Yeah.
He did, yeah. I mean, that's kind of that's why this, I think, has to be addressed, because as we've said in philosophy of science, right? Like, scientists do what they do in their geopolitical context in which they do it, and Hitler certainly found scientists with similar beliefs about race essentialism and creating an ethno state of his own to do the Holocaust. So like that's part of why I always want to try and like at least start to unpack it in a respectful way, of course, to figure out like, okay, how common really is this? Like, do we have this like massive institutional rot in science where, we just have a shit ton of race realists who are publishing and manufacturing consent for their ideas? Or is it just like a few bad actors? And I can, if interested, I can provide some literature about how a lot of these ideas are actually making it into like high school textbooks and shit, where people are picking up on race essentialist talking points in education at a very young age, because the people writing the textbooks are scientists who believe this shit.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big problems with cancel culture is that, like, for example, the cancel culture kind of like reaction to someone saying all white ethnostates are good is kind of like well, it's just bad because you're going to genocide people, so obviously it's a bad thing. But like, people don't learn unless they're kind of like engage in this crazy hypothetical, like why is multiculturalism good? Like what is the actual benefit of it, rather than all white ethnostate is bad? And I mean, it's the same reason why democracy is good, same reason why science is good, same reason why multiculturalism is good, is because you get a diverse background of people all working on the same problem, and you get a diversity of solutions, so you're able to better deal with these problems. So you're able to research it at a deeper level. You're able to create businesses that are actually engaging with the higher percentage of the population. You're able to draw upon more resources, more different backgrounds, of diversity of solutions and ideas. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think it's important, like, talking about that, to realize that those, that diversity will not always be someone that you want to be around, and that's part of building empathy, is like talking to them and seeing where they're coming from, and kind of like developing the diversity in your mind, rather than like just it being around you, because you can still, like my coworker, close yourself off to that diversity, and that doesn't make the diversity any good. You know what I mean? Like, just being surrounded by diversity is good, but you have to like open yourself up to that diversity too, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but then I sort of start reapplying Popper's paradox of tolerance. Like, what do
exactly,
we qualify
yeah,
as
there-
diversity and what qualifies as like get this the fuck out, please?
Absolutely. There is definitely a line to be drawn, but I'm saying just in a general sense, like
Yeah, okay.
diversity doesn't do any good unless you're open to it. But I
Yeah,
mean,
that makes
also
sense.
being around it makes you more open to it. So it's kind of like a, you know, self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing, but still.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I think like in that vein, the program that I'm in has been like making a concerted effort to accept more international students to sort of broaden perspectives to try and make things a little less like Western. And there's actually been a pretty big trend. I think there's a dude in my cohort who is from Venezuela, and we actually had an interesting conversation about Hugo Chavez and Maduro and Guaido. Like
Nice.
that was a very, very interesting conversation. But like, I think it speaks to how beneficial diversity can be in our institution. Like that's going back to what you said, Amber, about like the PC culture, right? Like that's something that typically gets lumped in with like PC culture. You know, we have to look at all these people from different backgrounds and different, overt racial appearances, and people self-report when they issue problems with all of that. Like they started pushing back against some of that, and that a little bit is at least how I took the mask off of my former roommate.
I was talking to my other coworker, the guy that works 2 days a week. He wants to get into medical school, and he was talking about how all these medical schools are like really giving heavy advantages to minorities. And he was like, I was bracing for the worst. And he was like, but I understand it because, you know, white men have ruled for a long time. And I'm like, look at him
Saved at the
go.
end.
Look at him go. Wow, so proud.
I think going back to this question of kind of political or social activism more for scientists, I think so in the same way that I'll call myself out for having benefited by kind of coastal elites having kind of a cultural hegemony and dominance in American culture. I'm a STEM lord as well, so I've experienced this kind of, I guess, economic and also cultural hegemony of just like, oh, you're smart, you did a STEM degree, you did the right thing, you weren't like one of these idiots who squandered
Liberal arts
their degree. We're doing a
students,
liberal
yeah.
arts degree,
Gender studies.
I used
finding
to be
out
like
what
that.
history is. Mhm.
God damn it.
But I think there's a real issue with the way that the American university system functions and is conceived of, which is for something like STEM, it gets treated a lot more like just you learn how to do something, and not as much kind of what are the larger consequences, or what kind of things should you try to do or not do. That distance between science and other disciplines, whether it's sociology or history or whatever, those are the kind of things that are not treated as so it's not a question of whether they're like sciences, but whether they're even like real disciplines. Like something like understanding history or understanding society are not treated as real disciplines that are real skills that are learned. And so this is the same phenomenon as like, oh, I'm Sam Harris, I'm a neuroscientist, and I studied meditation. Like, I'm going to come in, fucking have this like ethics revolution. It's going to be easy as shit. We're going to do it in like 2 seconds, write a book, boom, solved it, right? But this is really, really pervasive. He was only able to do that kind of as a figurehead because this is basically how America or the world or whatever kind of sees STEM kind of as like the only non-dumb thing to do, as the savior of humanity, as like this is what's going on. This is like the real shit, and that's something that has to change if we're going to have any chance of doing this, right? Because it's not just about like scientists need to step in and start being activists. but scientists are not trained to be activists because they aren't trained in sociology or history. We're missing those things that we need from these other disciplines. We need them. Scientists need humanities people.
Yeah, so then that's actually a really eloquent way of putting it, I think. Like, we're missing components from our training that would empower us to engage in that activism. So I guess, I mean, one, I wholeheartedly agree. Like, every bit of my curriculum as far as the courses have just been, the most STEM lordy shit. Like, you want to do a technique, here's a class times 10. Just that plus a couple of core classes and boom, you're done. But it doesn't feel complete. Like, I just feel like I'm learning how to be a lab rat and not really like learning how to be this, noble thinker in a lab coat that we've been made out to be. Mm-hmm. So I guess the question is, like, is this something where we have to sort of wait for this like small incrementalist change when people who agree with us sort of get power and like change curriculums for doctoral programs to incorporate more like humanities, sociology, or like, is there any faster route to sort of achieving that change?
But the problem with that change is that you're going to get people who decry gen eds and classes that don't have to do with their major being taught.
It's a waste
and that
of time.
They're wasting money and time doing this. Mm-hmm. And like, while I identify with taking a class you don't want to take, like, there's a reason that they have these general education courses in the curriculum, and it's not just to, make you waste money. Because I had to take multiple humanities classes for my gen ed, even though I was a science major. I still had to take, like, cultural anthropology, and my English class made me write a paper about something going on in the world that was like social, and I had like a bunch of experience with stuff like that kind of introduced me to the way I think now. But I mean, I guess it depends on how you look at it. If you want it as like a requirement for that major specifically and not a general education requirement, then that's one thing. But on the other hand, you're going to get people complaining about taking classes that aren't part of their major, because that already happens a fuck ton.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm almost like, I'm talking about something even more higher order for like grad school. Like, for undergrad, it's one thing, right? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're forced to pay for, and you have that conversation. But with grad school, it's different for most programs, because they're paid for and you're working to justify that payment. That, I think, is kind of, especially if we're talking about like the institution of science, right? If we're trying to field a more, politically activist generation of scientists in the future, right? That, I think, is the level you would need to target them at, is that like master's PhD level. Not necessarily just that, but like that'd be a good starting point.
I think you're still going to get the same problem that people complain about in undergrad right now about the gen eds. Like, you're just going to get that part too. But even
I complained about my current curriculum. Like, that was just exclusively STEM, and it fucking sucks. Like, it's just two people who teach shit because nobody else wants to teach it.
The biggest complaint I hear about college is you taking classes that have nothing to do with your major. And I think if you tried doing that in graduate school, there would be a lot of upset grads.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
but I think it's hard in grad school, and I also think it's maybe in some ways a little bit less impactful, because I think it's almost kind of too late at that point. Maybe, I don't know, and then
they've already been subjected to the world.
Yeah, I think it's tough, like, right? So this is kind of highlighting, so this problem is something that highlights the issue with, I guess, the neoliberal system, whatever, where we try to solve everything through economics and we economize everything. So it's so when we look at, like, okay, STEM is very productive. Pharma companies have high profits, and they bring a lot of like GDP to the country. We need a lot of like coders and STEM people to like make those engines go burr. But there's no like putting a price tag on, like, okay, well, if our scientists don't understand history, maybe they'll do, like use CRISPR in a way that reinforces bad social issues or something, or like kind of locks in inequality or a country. Like how do you put that in like economic terms of like this is it's just the wrong domain. This is like morality, right? Maybe we need fucking silly serious like crypto morality. Maybe we need like a moral coin, and we need to like put an economic cost on morality, find a way to take those kind of externalized costs and bring them in, and then maybe it'll somehow just work. But there's like there's real harm that it's like you can't quite capture with those types of metrics.
Yeah, that makes sense. Grumlow, welcome back.
I'm happy to be back.
That's quick.
Hail between your legs, just like we all said.
I without going into details,
It was a shit
because I stared into the abyss, and it stared back. I was late. It was over, but there was like a lagging call happening, and I just was like shooting the shit with some people I'm aware of, and
Did they start getting into like some TOS material?
Immediately.
Oh,
Wow.
mhm.
Oh, jeez.
I'll tell you about it later.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, they probably saw you were here and like, all right, time to violate every rule.
Oh, I told them like don't do TOS, and then they got into a conversation that I did not want on my VOD.
Ooh, that sucks.
That's what happens when you tell them. They'll just go right into it. Jesus. Well, welcome back. Glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
What are we talking about?
I like
Go ahead,
the
Greg.
idea of having like so I was going into my biology undergrad. I didn't want to take any like non-science classes either, just because you have to take so many science classes. So, but then like on reflection, actually some of my favorite classes were actually those ones that I got to take. So I had a insect ecology class that completely changed my life. That was really interesting. I had an upper division political science class, Democracy and Its Critics, which was incredible. The first time I've actually ever looked at and read constitutions as the primary source of literature on figuring out how a country operates, which is really cool. And then I had a Latin American literature class that really opened up my eyes about how a lot of the literature in South America is about exploitation and the working class and revolution. And it was really an incredible experience to have those. But I mean, I really feel like that's what undergrad is for. It's broadening you out, to get you into new areas that you've never explored before, and going into those areas and learning through failure, which is I think one of the key aspects of an undergrad education. And then I really feel like graduate school though should be more tailored and focused, because you're trying to, undergrad is kind of like at that, like a plane. You're at a plane level and you're going through a lot of different stuff. You're identifying cities and the terrain, but grad school is really about like actually mining, like going down deep into a subject for the first time and then learning about thinking, and applying those, how you think, to different areas or different ideas or a specific area in this case for grad school. So, I like the idea of graduate school being more tailored and undergrad being more broad, I guess.
Well, but even then, I'd maybe disagree with the notion that grad school is tailored a little bit. Like when you do your research with your PI in your lab for your dissertation, like the work you do specifically is tailored. But at the very least, like most programs do require people to take classes. Like I took very broad classes in my program. It was, they were biology, like it was, biochemistry and cellular and molecular biology. Like it was a core set of classes meant to like equip you to like be able to go into a variety of different labs and like not fuck up and like burn the whole city down because you mixed the wrong chemicals or something. Like that's the general premise behind it. But I think that the question still stands. Like if we're going to try and make sure the people who stay within science and who are going to be holding the disproportionate amount of power, those are typically going to be your owners of master's and PhD degrees. Like, shouldn't we take the steps to ensure that regardless of their educational background, they have the knowledge that we would want them to have to hopefully wield that power in a more humane way? I guess that's where I'm coming from. Like, I still
So-
think that's a valid
yeah.
question. Like, where do we target this? Like, that's, of course, a question I don't think is going to be easily answered. But it seems almost lacking to just, like, let grad school be grad school.
Yeah, so I can give just one counterexample of this. So I had a really, really good medical ethics course that I think was actually required as part of my PhD program, and that looked at like historical issues with the way medicine has been applied, kind of current issues, looking at hypothetical situations, and like how would we do this in an ethical way? You know, what's the right way to do this? So like, you know, a hypothetical like, okay, well, what would the pros and cons be of what if we had a program where people would get paid to donate organs to like a list, and then those would be like distributed out to the society, whatever people are on that list, right? I mean, these are in a very specific, very critical, like educational context. These are the kind of questions that, you know, should be asked and examined. There can be dangers kind of asking certain things like that very broadly, because, you know, when it's not in a kind of critical eye in an educational environment. So I think there definitely is space for questions like that, or courses like that to be taught that are kind of close to the field and the research, but explore those kind of things. I think there's a big place for that to happen in grad school. I think this needs to happen kind of at a societal level. I don't think these things being taught in schools is ever going to be enough. Maybe like we as scientists need to first of all just come out as saying, you know, we recognize that there's disciplines that have the skills to examine these kind of more like ethics and societal questions, and we don't necessarily have those skills because scientific education doesn't teach those skills. It should more and more, but these are things that need to be valued. Maybe us as scientists, because STEM is profitable and therefore valued, maybe people will listen when we say, okay, but you know, knowing history is also pretty important, right? Because we forget our history every I don't know. I can't even think about it. I was going to say like 10 years, 5 years, months. It feels like every day, pretty much the slate is wiped clean. If like as much as a day gets to pass.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think like that brings us almost to a chicken and the egg type of problem, right? Like, are we going to be listened to if we proclaim these things if we don't have like the skill set to really empower us as activists in the first place? But again, like I don't disagree.
Learn by
with
doing,
you.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we just have to fucking send it and see what
Yeah.
happens. Is that the outcome of this discussion? Just YOLO?
Try to collab with more humanities people, and you know, maybe they can teach us how to do that. Yeah.
Hey, I mean that's why we got Gremlo and Professor Q at the very least. I know we talked to Professor EXP, I think, in the earlier iterations of this, and then Professor Q is actually, I think, doing some work to try and get some of his colleagues as a guest for this panel who are in sociology, just to, you know, hopefully broaden our scope of knowledge and worldview. But like, that's the kind of thing. Like, I want everybody in my cohort like on here listening to that kind of shit, just because I think it has more of a benefit to them than, you know, going to department seminar, listening to what everybody else does for like the 10th time. You've heard their research already. Like, who cares? This is not important outside of the people doing that work. Rinse and repeat times everybody in grad school. Like, we could do better. That's just where I come from. It's just a sense of frustration, really.
I mean, I like seminar, I guess. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea to be introduced to other disciplines and other ideas. I mean, going from a biotech to an academia, the biggest thing that I noticed was like, wow, the amount of information that I'm exposed to is so broad in academia, and it's so cool. Like in biotech, I'm going to a conference that's very related to my field, but now I'm learning about like these physics and material sciences and all these nanomaterial stuff that I never really would have been exposed to otherwise. And now I'm learning that not only does it exist, but it's a whole field and people have PhDs in it. So I'm like, wow, I'm way out of my league. So it's really interesting to see how their approaches and their methodologies can be like taken in. You know, I've taken in a lot of ideas in experimental planning or controls or something like that. Maybe not exactly the same, you know, obviously because it's a different system, different approach, but it's like maybe I could use something else, or maybe there is a control or something that I can add here to my my ideas as a scientist and experimental planning.
Well, so I would agree with you if that's how my seminar worked. My seminar is literally just the grad students. Like, imagine if it was only like
you guys
your
don't have
lab
professors
presenting.
coming in?
Nope, we have 0 professors. It's solely the grad
All
students
year?
in the program presenting all year. Rinse and
Oh,
repeat.
No, it's the
all
same
year.
for me.
Are you serious?
It's the same for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
The same at my place too, but we also have like we have a super group. So mine does you one better. So we have the grad students who do it every week, and then we also have a melanoma super group that does presentations every other week. So you have the grad students presenting like every week, and then you have the melanoma group presenting every other week. So you just get like a shit ton of, you know, information that's interesting, but like, am I gonna want to sit there and listen for an hour?
Dang, yeah. I mean, we get rotating professors from all around the country that come in for Zooms, or they used to come in to the university and give seminar and stuff, and it was really interesting. I've actually followed some people's works from there. David Liu, he's one of my favorite synthetic biologists. That he actually came and I saw his talk, and I was like, oh my god, this stuff is so cool. I've been such a fan ever since. I'll put some synthetic biology. I just jaw-dropping research that is so cool, and it inspires you because you're like, this is so amazing, and my research is nothing not as cool like this. And then you get defeated, and then you come back and you're like, dang, let's do it. We usually have 1 quarter a year where people will just the grad students, like this coming up one I'm gonna have to present, but yeah, that's interesting.
Let me loop Gremlo into the conversation a little bit. While you were saying your mom exploded and running away from that panel,
So did Reading Rap send you that?
I think Mouselander said that. In
Oh
my chat.
no!
But no, what we were talking about in your absence was sort of this idea of I think Socrates put it really well. How do we find the space within science to try and address some of these issues and broaden the educational background of people in science, so that way they aren't susceptible to the IDW style programming. How do we sort of inoculate STEM lords against this kind of shit so we don't have to deal with it in the future? So that's where we're at. And I think Greg or Socrates brought up seminar. Actually, I think I brought it up. What the fuck? I brought up departmental seminars where we have to just attend talks from people just reciting their own research verbatim off of a PowerPoint, and it's not like what Greg described, which would be really cool, where it's just faculty rotating, talking about research that isn't in your field at all, not even remotely related. A seminar almost feels like it would be a good space to be yeah, here's the sociology department on campus here to talk to you about what they're up to and what they're doing.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
I totally
I
agree.
think crossover between studies is probably a big part of it. I mean, this might be part of my undergrad brain here because I don't have kind of the departmental experience that everyone on here does. But I mean, if I'm coming from my sociology brain, informing people within the department about common talking points that are being used within the propagandizing of the public against science, or to mislead the public, probably is one of the things that a newsletter almost.
Yeah.
Hey, these people are saying this.
Yeah, I really feel like there has to be some type of public outreach component that's woven into science now, since nobody, let's be honest, at my school is really involved in the city hall level or anything like that, and it's I feel like there has to be a mandated, the journals would be where it would have to be, because everyone has to publish or perish, right? So it has to be through that. if there was any way for like Nature Science or something to utilize their YouTube channel to say like, hey, you put out a front page, article, then we're gonna send someone to you, and we're gonna do like a little 5-minute speech or something, and we're gonna interview you, make a nice video about it, and I mean, you're paying like how much? $5,000 or $5,000 in order to have a science publication, so you should get something out of it. And then in that would be some type of training, right? Some like outreach training where it's like, this is something that people are talking about, and this is maybe the ideas that you want to hit on and talk about that, how that comes full circle.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the labor organizing within academia conversation too, because one of the things that we talk about often with like workplace, like red flag seminars, sexual harassment seminars that don't actually like get to the root of the problem, that don't actually educate people, is these aren't unionized workplaces. There isn't fair representation within the workplace. So bringing that into the conversation too is part of it. I think that, actually organizing these workplaces where if, let's say, one of your professors is a popular person within right-wing media who's mischaracterizing certain legislation and going on to PragerU and all of these talk shows. I'm talking about Jordan Peterson. And the larger body of academics within your university doesn't agree with what they're doing. That's one way that we can kind of, in a way, censor people, but also make sure that what is coming out of academics, what's coming out of university, meets certain guidelines with, as far as like ethics within academics. And I would say that what Jordan Peterson did was like unethical.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a woman, yeah.
right.
Fuck Jordan Peterson. Fuck him.
Yeah.
He can suck my dick. Anyway.
Did anyone watch
Sorry.
Mooncat's recent crypto video?
I've
I know
heard
some
about
of
it, but
those
I haven't
words.
watched it.
Ooh, it's a banger. It's like an hour and 45 minutes, but towards the end, she talks about Jordan Peterson, and a clip I had never seen of Jordan Peterson doing race science about a certain Ashkenazi population came up, and it was spicy.
Link this video in the ministry chat if you don't mind. I will probably.
Don't you worry.
I will find that part afterwards. Jesus Christ!
I'll find the timestamp for you.
Good Lord!
I guess I'm a little bit more like, I want ideas at the academic level to be like dangerous. Like I'm okay with that, Like I'm okay with the ideas being explored at that higher level being like something that we're not going to want. We should think about what the positives and negatives of fascism is, and the negatives outweigh the positives. I mean, it's pretty obvious and self-evident once you talk about it.
I think what you're getting at is kind of what Socrates was getting at when he was talking about his medical ethics class, how like in context of an educational environment, those conversations can happen. The problem is when they get out of an educational environment, they get mislabeled and misattributed to certain things. And I think I agree with you. I think talking about dangerous things is super important, like CRISPRing babies, like we did 2 weeks ago, but like outside of an educational and academic. What?
Wait, there was some new baby CRISPRing that happened?
Oh no, we just had. It was my first
It was me.
panel, and I was like, "Let's talk about CRISPR." 'Cause that's my shit.
Oh, okay.
But I think having those conversations outside of an educational or academic like space it can be kind of dangerous sometimes. Like, yeah, talking about fascism there in an academic space is fine, but like once you start, it has some positives. I mean, not enough, but it has some. And then everyone's like, scientists think fascism is the way to go. Like that kind of shit.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's a dichotomy between like entertaining an idea and trying to explore it in a very like academic way versus either like trying to censor any and all discussion around it, saying, no, you can't talk about that. That's not woke, as right wingers would frame us doing, or sort of going rubber banding to the other end of it and like allowing the Jordan Petersons of our institution to just run rampant unchecked without any opposition, to just say whatever the fuck they're going to say and let the let everything just happen. Let the fallout be the fallout. So I guess that's just a balance we would have to try and strike. But I think, we've already kind of found that equilibrium to some degree. I think there's an old saying that some of my old research advisors have thrown around in that facts have a liberal bias, and so they kind of use that as
Colbert quote.
I think that was Colbert.
Was that Colbert? I didn't realize it came from Colbert.
Yeah, facts.
Reality has a liberal bias.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there is some granular truth in that if you look at the composition of academia. But
that's funny.
Like, yeah, people generally lean that way. Oh, was that at the correspondence dinner?
Yeah.
We need to get Smite Knight on, because him telling me that historians, with the exclusion of military historians, are almost exclusively left-leaning is very, very interesting to me.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the military history part especially.
So you're saying that except for military historians are like pretty brainwashed. There's like real like cultural Marxism happening in the universities.
Right.
And
yeah, weird when you have a proper context of history, how you start to lean left.
Hey, bro,
Soros again.
Yeah, exactly. It's the globalists are changing the curriculum.
Yeah, I think if we, I mean, Dr. Bunawin talked about it this week in Philosophy of Science too, where it was like, the idea of having a philosophy class in high school. I think that would be like an interesting space to explore, like, what is thinking about something, or what is, the problem though, I feel like, especially now with cancel culture and all that kind of stuff, it's like, how do you explore those ideas or say things without having your friends like want to cancel you or not be friends with you because you're just being honest with like something? And then I think university is kind of like going deeper into that. Once you have that foundation, now you can go to university and actually like explore like even more things. So then when people see like a video of Jordan Peterson or something, it's like, because he's gonna be, there's a nugget of truth in there, right? It's like there's some nugget of that's bad. There's a nugget of some particular mint, and then there's a bunch of shit over it, and people can kind of like see. It's like, well, it doesn't really make any sense when you look at the big picture.
I would caution against using. Sorry, someone just scared alerted me. I would caution against. I've got a boost train going right now, which is a new thing Twitch did for small streamers.
Fog.
Yeah.
So they turned some hype trains into boost trains, and so apparently my stream's getting boosted. Anyway, I've had a little freak out. I would caution against using the term cancel culture. I would use like consequence culture. I know that's really cringy.
Okay.
But
No, so this is great. So this is like, this kind of mirrors the same thing we were talking about with like PC culture.
yeah, I know. But
Which, yeah.
there are some things where like being canceled, like deplatforming, being canceled is like, logical. But
Not really.
I understand.
I mean, it isn't though. Like I don't think that deplatforming should even be a thing. It's like we're at a weird aberration in time right now where we have huge like companies like YouTube and Twitch. These are huge monopolies that shouldn't even exist. They should be broken up. They should be broken up into multiple, companies, and you shouldn't really be able to. And even in a capitalist world, you wouldn't even have like a YouTube monopoly where you'd be able to be deplatformed just because you're banned off of one website. And I mean, Twitch does not give a shit about your civil rights. People will say like, and look at this and think, oh, Twitch is protecting me.
Fuck Twitch.
Twitch cares about its bottom line, about making money at the end of the day. Twitch cares about people not spamming the N-word because then you can't sell ads right next to that.
There goes
That's why.
Yep.
Let's be honest.
I mean,
like these are capitalist companies.
your concerns, and I understand that they're capitalist companies trying to protect their bottom line, but I still think consequence culture and things like that absolutely need to exist, because you cannot have a Nazi on Twitch because freedom of speech spouting like whatever the fuck they want, even if it's like a not capitalized platform. Like you just can't allow for that kind of, hate speech. Like there's no way around it. Like you just can't give a platform to that.
I mean,
in my opinion, I don't think so.
I don't even think cancel culture is real, if I'm being 100% honest.
I think
I
it's like
agree.
half. I think it's like half real. I think most. So like when J.K. Rowling talks about like, oh, we've been canceled, some people are like adding me on Twitter or like Brett Weinstein is like, I got canceled. I used to be nobody, but now I'm everywhere after I got canceled. Like I think like a lot of the examples that are given are just like flagrantly untrue. But I think when it comes to social media, so, example of like Donald Trump getting like banned off of Twitter or something. I think it's great that he got banned off of Twitter. I think they should have done that, and that was a good thing to do. I don't think that Twitter should have the capacity to have that kind of impact. A private company,
exactly,
shouldn't
dude.
be able to pull that kind of trigger. That kind of trigger shouldn't exist. It's like, it's quote unquote like good that they did that for him. I think that was justified, but they shouldn't have the power to do that.
Who would though? Because if it was a government agency, and then that would actually be violating constitutional rights. A private company doing it doesn't violate it.
So I agree with this. This is a good point, man. And I
think there should be a government agency that just provides
I agree.
some way of chatting. And the only kind of speech that isn't allowed on some platform that's guaranteed to exist is the kind of spam messages and stuff that like literally makes it impossible to like sort through information, period. I mean, stuff like that.
I agree, man. I think that my foundation is like,
or maybe doxing. I don't know.
I think that's like, the internet is a foundational right. I believe like everyone should have that access to that. So therefore, like the government has to have some type of like agency, or like, I agree, something that people can post messages online. And I think that basically posting that would be like freedom of speech protected. But in order to do that, you probably have to have people with non-anonymous accounts. You'd have to have people signing in through their social security account number or something like that, so that it's tied to your person. But you could say what you would want, and then you'd be held accountable for that, just like you would if you were to say something on a public platform or a public road. I mean,
so here's kind of the position I come from. I don't think that cancel culture itself is real. There are a handful of people who have been deplatformed. We talked about Milo earlier, how like his deplatforming was effective. That is good. Where cancel culture actually exists is right to work. When your boss is able to fire you for no reason and just kick you out of your job, fuck you out of your livelihood, that's real cancel culture. This like you getting woke scolded on social media, and like if you say transphobic stuff that's outside of terms of service, like I don't see this being like a real issue.
Well, wait. So there's like a synthesis that happens, right? So the all of the people saying this person is bad, this person should be removed from this platform. Those people don't remove that person. Those people don't have any power. They can't do anything. The platform uses that as justification or maybe impetus. So maybe, so in a way, I guess people can have power, but it's only in a very specific direction. They can say, we might like buy fewer of your products if this person is on here, and the company says, well, we have an ethical obligation to maximize profits to our shareholders, so like we're not going to stand for that, and then they eat them, right?
Yeah, like platform culture, stuff like that.
I'm very wary of using deplatforming as a method to fight important things that we need to be fighting, like fascism, because basically, you have these monoliths that exist, right? You have Twitch and YouTube.
But wouldn't it be fascism if the government did it, not if a private company does it? That's like not fascism if a private company is doing it, because you can just go to another alternative.
But there isn't
like
one
that's
right
what
now.
everyone yes there are. That's what all these people that get deplatformed do. They go to other platforms.
They're monopolies, though. They're monopolies. I mean, but what we're doing, but by using deplatforming as a way to fight fascism, we're basically enabling these smaller companies to open up and be people like being diverted into them. And what's going to happen is YouTube and Twitch, the first quarterly report that they see a decrease or even a stability, right? Because these mega corporations, they care about growth. They don't care about billions of dollars. They care about growth in billions of dollars. And when you have them going flatlining, you're going to have huge shifts. You're going to have YouTube, you're going to have like Twitch. They're going to start opening up their TOS and being like, fuck, if this is what it takes in order for us to get more people, we're going to fucking open up the floodgates. And these TOS violations that we've been using in order to deplatform fascists, it's all going to come back. They're all going to come back.
So the most recent example we can kind of look to was Parler, right? When Trump got banned off Twitter and everybody's like, we're unsubscribing from Fox Nation and we're going over to Newsmax and we're deleting our Facebooks and we're going over to Parler. What immediately happens when that happens is it's immediately flooded with Nazis and it's just nothing but child porn. And then people who are not that far right just migrate back. And the very marginal echo chambers that are created out of it just become a hotbed for CP. And then they get taken down because, hey, look at that. The whole platform is just kids. So I don't really see where it becomes a problem of like it being a economical issue for these companies, because the main majority of the platform, the reason that they're becoming like so woke and why conservatives hate them is because they're just playing into the largest public share, which is a more and more progressive audience. So I don't really think, even if we made like very, very strict TOS surrounding like right-wing hate speech, even if that clapped 50,000 people the second that it went down, they're going to create sock accounts and then they're going to find a way around TOS. And it's going to be a constant like tweaking of the edges around terms of service. I don't see like a super big problem in like kicking Nazis off of your platform. They're Nazis.
Well, so the
like overt Nazis, not just people being labeled as
Sure.
Nazis. They are actual Nazis. I think that's important because, you know, someone in my chat was
If
like,
you're JQ posting, then yeah, you're probably a Nazi.
yeah, someone in my chat was like, I feel like Nazi has lost all of its meaning, and I'm like, no, these are like actual Nazis.
So there's like an issue. So the people that we think about people complaining about being canceled, and then they're still like in our face 24/7.
Yeah, Dave
Those
Chappelle.
are like, sure, Dave Chappelle, J.K. Rowling, Donald Trump, whatever, right? Like, but these are people who are very like wealthy, maybe not that powerful, but somewhat powerful and influential. So these are people who can weather that, right? They get canceled off of Twitter. They go on to Fox News, whatever, right? They have other outlets. It's the people who don't have those other outlets. And in terms of the people who are excluded from the mainstream media, it's a lot of the most overt, like Nazi people probably aren't making it onto the major news networks, but lefty people are pretty universally not making it onto major news networks. And when they get, inevitably, because this is exactly what happens, to make it fair, we have to ban both sides. And so I have friends that are like, you know, lefties that talk, you know, do like podcasts, whatever, that have gotten like, you know, banned off of Facebook, this kind of thing, banned off of Twitter. These are corporations. They're not going to be instrumental as affecting a left-wing political change. That's not in their interest. It's not what they do. And so the best we can expect is fair. People who aren't centrists or centrist posting get banned. And
I
what
mean,
is that? Yeah, what does that get?
I feel like I mean, I know that there are like not good leftists out there, like, you know, people that say violent shit and stuff. But I feel like there's a big difference between, you know, radicalized right and radicalized left in terms of.
Oh, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that I think that they're the same, but in terms of, I don't know about rates at which they get
But
banned. Maybe
that's
right wing
like
people get banned more often,
But you can
but it's still like
Exactly.
it's not
But there's a
influencing
reason.
like
you can imagine a scenario.
positive political change.
You can imagine a scenario where the President Bernard Sanders finally gets in, and he's sitting there, and he's like going to be going for let's say like a trying to shut down like the pipeline expansion or something that's happening, and the number one,
Which Biden did.
the number one contributor or owner or part shareholder of Twitter is an oil company. And they say, you know what, we're going to shut you down, President Bernard Sanders, because you're inciting violence against people. And it's like, I mean, it's very easy to imagine these scenarios where it's like we have a for-profit company that's sitting there trying to limit the speech of even though it's not a constitutional speech, it's a private company. I agree, but it's still tampering down on the ability for that president to reach out. And it's like Twitter didn't give a shit about civil rights and Trump actually threatening nuclear war on Twitter for years. And then at the very
Not an
end,
animal.
the
Like
very
doing
end,
terrorism
they
to
come in
Iran.
and say, "Oh, like we're going to kick you off." I mean, it's so performative. I think they had their cake both ways. I think it's complete bullshit.
I mean, like leftists already, like, especially like during 2020, like with the BLM protests, leftists were getting clapped left and right for, ACAB, 1312, fry 'em like bacon, Molotov cocktail in a cop car is pretty hot, that kind of stuff. I already see it happening to the left. Most leftists who are a little more extreme with their rhetoric on Twitter are probably on their second or third account. But if we want to make an argument for an actual like public social media, I'm cool with talking about nationalizing a platform.
I think
if we want to break up these things, I'm totally cool with that.
It has to be.
Nationalizing ISPs, totally down for
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
But again, the question comes, if it is a like public platform in the actual truest sense of the word, where it's ran by a government agency, well, then its censorship has to be very, very careful because we get into constitutional violations.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the point. That would be the point. Like you'd have to, and I think this is where the internet is going to go eventually. All these other countries have it, where it's just like your internet history is tied to your person. It's going to happen eventually. I think in the United States, it's going to happen. But on this like the nationalized one, you'd have to have your person. And I think, by the way, that's where a majority of the toxicity comes from. By the way, like in the internet, is through anonymity. I
don't know. I like anonymity. I mean, I want the NSA to at least have to do like a left join,
And also, like for like marginalized communities like trans folk, we don't want someone's like actual identity out there because they're going to be targeted.
Sure. I mean, they would have the ability to post or not to post on this public, nationalized, like, Twitter.
Well, you have the, yeah, exactly. You have the ability to post or not to post on Twitter. So, getting canceled, like, just don't use the platform.
And found out. Like,
yeah. I don't understand your take here. Like, people who incite violence should just be allowed, or like, threaten people over Twitter should just be allowed to do that, or people who call people slurs on Twitter should just be allowed to do that. Like, what is the alternative?
Like, Twitter is not trying to prevent that from happening. Twitter is trying to look for their bottom line and their shareholders, just like any other capitalist company.
I know, but those shareholders don't want that shit on there. So like,
because they can't sell ads. That's why.
I know
because
their
they can't sell ads. It's not the civil rights
Greg,
violations.
I know their motivations aren't good. I know that. But like, it doesn't matter because they're just taking that bullshit off the platform. That's what I care about. I care about the end result. Like, I know that their reasoning is not good, but right now in our like, environment, that's the best we can hope for. What's your alternative to that? A government social media site where anytime someone gets banned, it's just, oh, my First Amendment, the government's trying to silence me, they're doing fascism. Like, what would you like to see happen in this situation?
I think that
a genuinely bad person.
I mean, I would like a lot more media companies, basically. I think we need a lot more media companies that have a lot like different ownership models, like Means.tv. I think that's an interesting content co-op that's happening, where the content producers actually collectively own the platform. I think we need to stop waiting for these Amazon and YouTube in order to come around on a lot of these social media, like these civil rights issues.
Okay, but people flock to other people. So of course the popular social media sites are just going to trend more popularly.
Exactly.
So like,
yeah, just like capitalism, right? That's what the money seems to collect, right? It seems to be very,
Trust me, Greg, I fucking hate capitalism, all right? I fucking hate it. I hate that advertisers have control over it. But at the same time, like, what's the fucking alternative? There are plenty of social media websites out there. There's a reason people aren't using them because they're not as populated as densely as places like Twitter or YouTube or Twitch. Like, what, like, I don't understand your take here, I guess. I'm just very confused by it.
I mean, you break them up. You break these companies up and they obviously have a monopoly on it. I mean, Google, like, their buyout of YouTube, I mean, it's just, then you basically break up YouTube into a separate company. It's like,
so I think the fundamental question at the core of a lot of this is who adjudicates, right? If there are harmful bad actors on insert platform here, who adjudicates? If the platform is run by a private company, you might have some issues if the private company is acting more in an effort to pump up their bottom line and don't necessarily want to adjudicate and remove harmful content. But if we're entertaining the idea of a publicly run set of social medias or singular social media, then that does raise a First Amendment question, because the whole point of the First Amendment is the government can't censor you, can't give you consequences for just simply speaking your mind. And the utility of social media in society, that's why people sort of analogize it to a public forum where people are basically just exerting their free speech. They're shouting their takes into a digital ether, and what happens. So I think there is some utility in actually breaking up the private companies that currently run social media, because it seems like, in a very capitalist sense, which I think we've talked about, they prefer their bottom line rather than removing harmful content. I think we all would agree that we would want to see, explicit, swastika tattoo having Nazis and the like sort of yeeted and deplatformed. But I think it really just boils down to what kind of structure would we want to see after such a monopoly busting of the YouTubes and the Googles and the Twitters, the Facebooks. Like, what does that look like? Because we would have to resolve a censorship issue if it was publicly run. I think there is so much inertia behind social media, you might not be able to manifest it in a privately owned way, because you're just going to run into the same problems eventually. The platforms will grow again. They'll start acting in a manner consistent with profit motive, and now here we are. Like, this is actually a pretty difficult question, I think.
Okay, like Twitter, for example.
Sure.
I don't think they're like this huge monopoly company, are they? Like, they don't own other things besides Twitter, do they? I don't know, like, the inner workings of... I know Facebook owns Instagram and stuff like that. Like, that's probably a problem. But I'm saying, like, Twitter or things like that, they're not these huge, like, owning multiple, like, entities kind of companies. They just have a fuck ton of people on their website, right? Or am I wrong?
I think they're like the other type of monopoly. So there's, like, monopoly where you own too many types of things. Twitter, I think, has like a pretty large market share in terms of like this particular space, and for that reason, we could probably put some kind of antitrust laws to work.
But
it's not just
there's
like
alternative.
it's not just market share though. It's like the principal investors on Twitter, like BlackRock is a big principal investor on Twitter. They own like a large portion of it. So I don't think it's so much of like how many platforms are a part of the Twitter sphere. It's also how much of the market share, how much control do they have over that specific space? Because this is where like news is shared, information, breaking news, stuff like that. So I don't know. It seems like there has to be some kind of governing body that puts the pressure on the company itself if it's going to remain private. Who finds some kind of restricted access for the investors? I don't know.
Yeah, the Twitter is owned by majority for Vanguard and then BlackRock, and so yeah, I would classify like Amazon like as a mega monopoly, where they're actually monopolies in multiple sectors. And so then they go to the regulators and they're like, oh, what do you mean we're a monopoly? Like, we have plenty of competition from Walmart, from YouTube. So they can list a bunch of these competitors. But in reality, like, Amazon's Amazon, and those should all be broken up into separate companies.
Amazon should be like 7 different companies.
Yeah, I would like to see Twitch detached from Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just kidding, Jeff. I don't mean that.
Partner, please, partner.
He means it. We all mean it.
Yeah.
I think
I'm not worried about getting canceled from Twitch here. I can say what I want.
Not while we're on panel.
Well, I'm on your panel, so you get canceled. I'm not even streaming right now. Totally safe. I think to actually solve these kind of issues, so to solve a lot of the issues with Twitter, I mean, it really has to be more of like a kind of like a cultural change. Like, so personally, I don't see Twitter as like a meaningful space, but people do treat it that way, and in treating it that way, it gains that kind of power. I don't think that discourse is possible or happens or has ever happened on Twitter. I don't think it's the right space for that. I think it generates a toxic mindset in people who use it. I think it's probably like harmful to its users. I don't think there's really very much a value other than like just bubbling up memes, which could happen like anywhere. So I think as a society, we should everybody should think exactly like me and just treat it like not really a thing that exists. When I become totalitarian ruler, I'll have re-education camps for people with check marks.
My god.
But I mean, it's just like platforming. Like, I don't think deplatforming removes those ideas from a society fundamentally. And I mean, the biggest actual Nazi website on the internet has existed since 1996.
Right,
so,
but you prevent them from spreading that ideology to people who are, on the border or teetering on the edge. People who are going down those fucking pipelines. Yeah. You're letting them, push them farther down the pipeline. But like, I guess, okay, I'm still confused about this monopoly idea. So, I mean, I understand that they're owned by or their shares are owned by large venture capitalists, and that's a problem. But I guess my question is, does something being popular inherently make it a monopoly? Like, if you're the most subscribed person on YouTube or Twitch, does that mean you have a monopoly over that platform?
It's a good question. I don't know if we have an answer for those kind of questions in our current kind of age. I think market share can be something that determines a company to be a monopoly if they have beyond a certain. I think there's percents maybe that are specified sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, if someone has a beyond a certain percentage of subs on a platform, do they have a monopoly over that platform?
I don't know. I don't know if it works kind of recursively. So if a company isn't a monopoly, but somebody has a large market share over, so should Hassan be split into multiple channels or something? I guess
that's how I view it. I view a popular. Go ahead.
So a YouTube channel isn't a monopoly because other channels can become as popular as that channel. You can
social media can become as popular as Twitter. That's my point.
Absolutely not. Because no, especially for Google or YouTube or something like that, can you imagine actually trying to create the bandwidth that YouTube has or anything like that, or the AdSense that they have and the algorithm in order to push videos at you? You would never be able to compete against YouTube. I mean, this is why it's a monopoly. Yeah. And by the way, on top of that, you would be a company that's in the United States, and you're actually paying taxes here when YouTube and Google is actually considered an Irish company or whatever. So they're not paying any taxes like you are. So you'd have a systemic problem of not paying. You'd have to pay taxes, and then you'd have a data problem where it's just it's a behemoth and you can't get to there. And then you have the technical problem of you not being able to actually have the bandwidth or afford the bandwidth.
Someone in chat brings up an excellent point that if the code for these sites isn't open source, then you can consider it a monopoly. I would consider Twitter because it's kind of a specific space within social media, like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. These all kind of have crossover. Twitter's is kind of its own little weird thing because it's all text. I would kind of consider Twitter an oligopoly since it kind of has a very specific control over that type of engagement, at least within the Western world, because when we start looking to China, we have what do they have? Chat is Wahoo or something like that.
Yeah, Weibo for Twitter, and I think Baidu is Facebook.
Yeah. So they have a kind of a different thing, but then we have to look at how they control internet access in China. So I don't know. I think it's mostly about whether or not the source code is open or the code is open source.
Well, I think that speaks to what Greg was saying too about just this general barrier to entry. If you're a new upstart social media platform, there's such a massive barrier to entry to even be competitive with something like a Twitter or a Facebook. And we can clown on Trump because he literally has Republican billionaire backing and made fucking Truth Social, and they can't even get through their fucking backlogs of 500,000 plus people. It's static, and Trump isn't even tweeting on it. Yeah. So even with Republican funding, they still haven't been able to dethrone Twitter from its place in I guess the cultural hegemony of social media. It's such a massive entity that it draws a lot of comparisons to a public utility, and I think in that sense it kind of like just has to be dealt with in some capacity, regardless of what you do. Like, it is a problem that has to be addressed somehow.
And it's so weird.
So
like,
is
we're in
there-
this weird moment where like even capitalists aren't willing to take on these monopolies, and that's that's the fundamental role in order to create a fair market is government to regulate monopolies. And yet you don't have the GOP going for that. It actually blows my mind. I really don't understand.
Well, this is something really interesting that I learned, that apparently China realized this is a problem, and the government is now creating a program to like bubble up and promote small companies to do, like, they're realizing that like normal like capitalism isn't really happening or working well anymore, and so they're like subsidizing just normal capitalism, so that just like generally companies can grow and bubble up and,
we need a competitor.
and have that happen.
We need a competitor.
I mean,
But is there anyone
idea
who
of,
agrees
like,
with me that Twitter should be like nationalized and then just shut down? Because that's what I want to have happen. Because I don't think it's a public good. I think it acts like a public utility in the sense that we've been talking about, but I don't know that there's anything beneficial that results from its existence.
Twitter is very weird because ads is what it gets its like revenue from, and data sharing, because that's like also a big part of it. It's not just ad, it's like data share. There's no content creation on Twitter. There's like memes and there's like pages you follow because they like post funny stuff and or like informative. But there's no actual monetization of a Twitter account. Something like TikTok, that's very different, because then we can start thinking about like I just got a raid. Thank you, Ryzen. I'll be there in a second. TikTok is very different because we can talk about a more holistic approach to how we do like revenue sharing on that with the creator fund and whatnot. Twitter is very different because there's no monetization on it. There's no, you get your blue check mark and then you start getting out of the creator fund. So maybe Twitter is a place where that is like the right place for a public forum, where that is what needs to be nationalized, and that way we actually have a open communication platform. You are 100% right that Twitter, because of its algorithm, because of the kind of anonymity that comes with it, it foments a lot of bad behaviors, very toxic behavior. But I don't know if that's a consequence of the algorithm. I don't know if that's because of anonymity. I think it's like a multi-pronged issue. I don't know. But we can talk about how do we decouple this from private interest while also maintaining people's rights and making sure that people who are using these platforms, who are like using it for their livelihood, for communication and whatnot, can monetize it if that's what they need.
I think we forgot about Vine in this conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
as meme
Never
as
forget
that
Vine.
sounds, I think we forgot Vine in this conversation.
and even Vine couldn't compete.
Yes, they could.
Obviously not. They went bye-bye. They couldn't.
That's not why they shut down. They didn't shut down for money.
If they were making tons of money, why would they shut down?
Why do you think they... Oh my God, hold on.
They weren't profitable
I don't know
enough.
anything about this, so
They weren't profitable enough. I mean, what other reason would a private company not shut down? Because they couldn't realize how to monopolize on their user base, and they couldn't make money off of it. People weren't willing to watch a 30-second ad before a 10-second video. It's like, my main
TikTok's doing it now, and they're highly successful
because they're selling the shit out of you. They're scraping your brain for every second that you like look at the screen and what you know, and they're selling that. My main point.
I get that,
my main point of this is that like fighting
I'm just saying
fascism, fighting Nazis is too important to leave to for-profit companies. So we have to like figure out how to fight this stuff and not leave it in the hands of these huge multi-billion-dollar multinational companies.
The problem is you're gonna have, as you do currently, you're gonna have people decrying fascism. Like they're just gonna cry it out every single time. Like you can't have anyone but private companies do it because of our Constitution.
Yeah, not to like bring this discussion full circle, but I think if I remember correctly, Vine was bought by Twitter.
Yeah,
there you go.
They were.
Shit. Well, that makes my point too.
I know, but like, I understand that part of the point. What I don't understand is like, the government or not private companies doing the deplatforming and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's a
make
legitimate
sense to me.
question.
I mean, as with any type of democratic approach to these things, it's we're looking at it's called the tragedy of the common scenario, where we have not actually invested into philosophy in the high school setting. We haven't actually put in the hard work of actually educating an entire generation on this stuff and on why it's bad, not just because Nazi is bad, but like why, like I was saying before, why is an all-white ethno-state inherently a bad thing?
I'm sorry, I just
Thank you,
unmuted.
Read
Wait,
and Rap.
what?
I didn't read all of the articles. So Read and Rap just corrected both of us and said that the Vine executives were against monetization and didn't take money from brands, so Twitter discontinued the service.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a
I knew
profit
it
motive,
wasn't because they
you know?
didn't make money, because they had a fuck ton of people using it. Like,
No,
there's
but
no way that
was
they
the whole
couldn't have
point.
made money.
Twitch,
Greg,
okay,
I understand.
Okay.
But it's not the point that you were trying to make. Like, when I
all
said
of those,
they weren't
all those
making
scenarios
money,
make my point.
they chose not to.
They didn't.
And so Twitter never mind.
Yeah, I mean, the functional outcome seems to be identical. I mean, there's different paths to sort of the same endpoint of, a bigger platform subsumed a smaller one, wanted to monetize the shit out of it. And when the smaller one had an ethical objection to that, then they just destroyed it because it didn't serve the interests of the larger capitalistic entity that bought it. But I think the question, and again, I think Socrates is probably right. I'm not sure we're going to actually be able to answer this here or even ever, is if you have a government public forum, if we, nationalize Twitter, let's just say we started with Twitter, what is that going to look like in terms of removing objectionable content? If we define democratically, objectionable content as, people saying Nazi shit, being overt out and about, swastika tattoo having Nazis, obviously we would have to do that. I think that the one defensible point of a government run Twitter as a public platform would be the notion of accountability, in the sense that if there was some way to, vote out a person who was running the Twitter if they were doing a bad job of running government Twitter, the same notion of voting out our representatives or our Congress people, that's the whole notion of democracy, is that there at the very least is a modicum of accountability at the ballot box, regardless of your takes on electoralism. That's sort of the notion that you can vote people out if you don't like the job that they're doing. So in theory, if the government was to own a Twitter, you would want that to be structured in a way where there would be democratic accountability, and you couldn't just have a bunch of right-wing chuds who are free to convoy posting, vote out the Twitter user manager from the government because they didn't like that they were taking down all the white supremacist shit that came with it. So that would have to be a set of very niche ethical questions in that scenario, which I'm not sure we would ever even get to in the first place. But I do think it's a consideration we would absolutely have to keep in mind in that scenario, is who adjudicates.
Yeah,
I think fundamentally.
Some kind of national. You're okay. I'm going to be real quick. I think there needs to be and we're talking about complete hypotheticals here, right? This is ideal utopian thought. If there was a nationalization of not only would we have to nationalize the internet, everyone has equal access to this, and equal distribution of data. Not only would we have to do that, not only would we have to have an open platform that is ran by the public, we would also have to have a institution set up to ensure that public square is treated exactly the same way as we treat normal speech, interpersonal speech. But we also have to ensure that whatever we ascribe as free speech has to be within a certain doctrine, because we're protecting people from hate speech, we're protecting people from being the hyper radicalized into alt-right stuff. So there has to be a specific doctrine that we follow that says this type of speech is okay, this type of speech is not okay, we eat this type of speech off the platform, and that's it. This is incredibly, incredibly difficult to do and nigh impossible.
I think I agree. I think fundamentally there's no shortcut to a better society or to better speech. If the majority of your society is ignorant and has bad ideas, like don't know most things and like have overall bad ideas. Like if you have a majority like Nazi society, then democracy will not save you. Corporations will not save you.
Right.
Like fundamentally, it has to be a more educated populace. I think it's ultimately going to be futile. Those kind of band-aids at the last step of just stopping people from saying things. You can, I think sometimes people overstate that you can't quarantine ideas. Obviously, you can stop ideas from spreading. This is something that America has done with communist and left-wing ideas. We had a Red Scare for decades and
before the
eradicated. Yeah. But I think to some degree you could do this now. That there's probably a way that you could make a lot of this happen. But they were able to functionally dismantle a huge number of organizations. People were kicked out of the country. Were like not allowed back in the country, or were blacklisted across corporations, and those kind of like organizations and ideas haven't recovered. So it is possible to do that. I don't know that those are the kind of things that could be done kind of in the opposite. I don't know if I can imagine a society that's like left wing and on its way to like a communist utopia, and it's yeeting people because they like espouse fascist beliefs. I don't know that I can imagine the opposite. It makes sense in one direction.
Yeah.
But I don't think it. I think that the kind of ideas of like freedom and liberty are kind of like antithetical to the tactics that would be required to do that, to get rid of like bad right-wing ideas.
Yeah, it would be kind of like a China situation, but in the most idealistic, like our side possible. So like a great wall of or a great firewall of China, but for right-wing ideology. And that's hard to ask for.
You could only watch Chomsky, no Peterson.
That was my
government mandated Chomsky.
That was what I was trying to get at when I was bringing up like government social media and why that wouldn't work, was because of the point that you just brought up. Like, we have this fundamental like constitutional right in this country to freedom of speech, and you can't have the government police that, because then you get into that territory. And
I don't think they should is the thing. So I don't disagree that. Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't either, but I'm saying like if private companies don't do it and the government shouldn't, what the fuck are we? What's the solution? And I know that there's not always a solution, but I'm just like trying to point out that you can decry private companies for taking people down all you want, but I mean, saying that the government should be in charge is arguably worse, in my opinion, than having private companies do it.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is like a fundamental shift in core values of whatever institutions are overseeing it, and this is the monumental task.
Yeah, I think the best that the government like could or should do or whatever is like neutrality, right? So net neutrality, like a neutral freedom of speech. So I can see, Greg, some of the upsides of what you were saying with, so what if you had something that's like Twitter, but it's run by the government? You have your like driver's license or whatever hooked up to it. So this is your homepage. If people want to hear what you're saying, they come here. That's kind of cool. And then if you start just like making death threats, then those become like real threats. And then, I don't know, you get like a knock at your door or something.
Yeah, because you'd basically be able to know exactly who it is, and you'd be held accountable by law. So you'd be able to go. So people would be able to sue you. Public defenders would be able to sue you and put you in jail based off of threats or violence and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I'm really rapidly starting to hate this. I think. I mean, all of the pros and the cons are like the different sides of the same coin, right? I think it's great if people are held accountable from saying awful things. That's great. If people are held accountable for saying good things, that's bad. So right, like there's been news stories of like oh, some police officer said some racist thing on their Facebook and the police station found out, and now they have to like work at the police station in the next town. Their life is ruined, right? Those kind of things happen, and that's kind of good. But it's like, you know, what if, I don't know, so like a Twitter that you can't meme on or whatever, because it's like the first thing any company does when they're going to hire you is they're just going to look at your public record of.
I mean, people should have
speech,
a chance. People, if the internet is a nationalized resource, which I think that it probably should be, then there should be some way of like bulletin board mail, like a mail system, basically. So this would be like, you know, a just like how, you know, it's a constitutional right to, in order to send letters to one another, like through the postal service, like it should be that way on the internet. Where you don't have to have like a private corporation tied to your right to say something or communicate an idea. I mean, we can see this in science, right? We could see this in science of like not being able to post something or publish something that is so out of the mainstream, but has scientific merit. I mean, you could see how it could get tampered down. It's kind of a fundamental. It's the First Amendment, so I feel like that we should have some type of like thing that we have because of it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's net neutrality. You know, the internet is a neutral playing field where everybody gets to log on, and you know, if they want to do awful shit and JQ post on Maine, then okay, that's a thing that you've chosen to do. I think, Greg, you speak to the need for accountability, and I think it probably needs to just come from at least a greater amount of society rather than necessarily coming from the government in its current incarnation. Because you could probably imagine, Greg, you know, during the Trump years, if you logged on to Twitter and Twitter was run by the government and you said Orange Man bad or equivalent, then you might face consequences from the government for speaking out against Donald Trump. You know, you have to, again, always ask that question, who adjudicates? And you have to ask that in the context of, you know, if you have a government Twitter, the government changes. And depending on the form of government and who controls it, the outcomes of them controlling anything could be widely different.
And basically the parties would know that, right? They would know, hopefully in this utopia there aren't parties, but whatever. Let's just say that there are. I mean, they would know that, right? They would know that, like, okay, well, if you censor me and I censor you, then we don't get nowhere. Kind of thing. It'd be a tragedy of the commons scenario. So
I'm not sure we would have like a mutually assured destruction, but Twitter, like
exactly.
Well, but again, like honestly, I think they wouldn't hesitate to do that. I mean, if you look at how Republicans and right wingers, conservatives in general, not just in America but across the world over history, they will not hesitate to wield their powers against anything they perceive to be the left.
Absolutely,
right? There is always a disproportionate wielding of that power against left. Either content creators or just people in general. You can even look at YouTube, Twitter. I mean, a lot of social media platforms, like they disproportionately ban people who are leftist. They deplatform leftist content at higher rates than actual, you know, right wing and conservative content. Even on our current system, without this utopian hypothetical, that's just how it is. So there's a question to be asked. You know, do we want to give wannabe despots and authoritarians the ability to do more authoritarianism at our own expense?
But I don't think that this would be the only way of like posting anything. I mean, you would have private corporations that would allow different varying levels of moderation, right? You would have like, hey, I'm Twitch and we do like very strict moderation here. We do, you know, all these things. We're going to protect that, you know, these areas. And then you have other companies that have other varying, you know, relationships to moderation and how strict they want to be, which is how it already is.
Yeah, but I mean, again, like that brings us to, you know, we're fundamentally reliant on the benevolence of a private entity, which, you know, I think historically over the course of capitalism has not gotten us to places where
because you'd always have that option to post on, you know, USA.com or USA.gov, and then you could post on whatever that you would want there. You wouldn't like it's. I don't feel.
So what you're saying is a public option for social media.
Exactly. Yeah. No, unironically. Yeah.
So that's a different take than nationalizing the social media entirely, but rather
I wouldn't want to nationalize all of the. Yeah, I don't think that we would want to nationalize, and you wouldn't want to restrict the internet like that, because I mean that's just not the take that I think that the best internet gives. You know, like for example, like we had that opportunity at the late 90s to do that with the internet, and there were a lot of Republicans that were calling for that at the time, but it's more libertarian in that aspect. You know, we let that websites exist, because peer-to-peer HTTP, you're not gonna be able to regulate that. Everything changed once the internet is invented. Everything.
Yeah, so I mean that's a idea that I think I could probably support in at least some degree, a public option for social media, because that doesn't eliminate the private companies from existence. It doesn't, change all that much fundamentally about how we interact with the internet, but rather it gives people who are deplatformed, I guess, a place to just shout into the ether. So interestingly enough, it might just become an aggregate of everybody who's too distasteful for shareholders.
It's just going to be 8chan all and 4chan.
But
all
yeah,
rolled
I
into
don't.
one.
I mean, I doubt that with if you had.
I mean,
real
look at any
names.
time there's been a freedom of
Yeah,
speech
I mean-
social media, it's exploded with child. Like, so, I don't remember who it was.
Well, I mean,
that was
any
saying it.
platform.
Sure, but if
You're
it's
gonna put child porn with your
But if
real
there's
name
no
attached to it?
anonymity, yeah.
No way.
I mean, okay, then what happens when there's a hack or a data leak?
What's your real name? But it's already out there. It's fully transparent. It's who it is. How would that mean
They're
anything?
just gonna have your name.
Your name would be out there already.
I mean, if you're a registered voter, your public name, and I think even your address, I think technically is available.
I know, but I mean, like, if someone hacks the social media website,
yeah.
you said earlier, like, social security number or something attached to it, like, people are gonna fucking have access to that.
Yeah, but I think you would want to make it more secure. So ideally, you wouldn't want to use a social for that. Maybe, I don't know, a driver's license number. That's not
Sure,
a weaponizable
yeah, that'd be fine.
identifying information item.
Something
that ties you and your identity to the person on the platform that
Mhm.
cannot be used against you if it was made public.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
If the internet is a thing that everyone should have the rights to, then people should have the right to speak on that. I feel like outside of a private corporation, fundamentally.
I think getting back to I've been trying to think this during trying to understand what my hesitation is about deplatforming or canceling even Nazis,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I think this kind of goes back to I guess what I was saying about political correctness, that this issue with the way that ultimately it's always going to be right-wingers canceling more left-wingers, or the government canceling more left-wingers than right-wingers, or corporations doing that, whatever. I think there's it's so seductive to feel good about being able to sit back and say, okay, I know this platform isn't in it for me. I know they're in it for their money and their shareholders. I know they don't care about whatever good things, even though, I don't know, maybe Zuckerberg is more liberal than conservative or whatever. Who cares? He's a billionaire. He's the bad guy, whatever. But there's something really seductive about saying okay, well, they are, at least doing this thing to clean up. Here's this guy who's saying something racist or a Nazi or whatever, and they're at least stopping this guy from talking. I think there's kind of alarm bells that go off whenever I get that feeling, because sitting by, and not that I'm doing that much to call this out, but at least stating that I'm not okay with that, and in my heart knowing that I'm not not happy about that. If somebody that I think is really kind of saying something even politically egregious, and they get canceled, and I just accept that, then that means that I'm basically accepting them having the power to do that. And I do believe that it ultimately will be turned on any kind of more radical left-wing or revolutionary
Mm-hmm. Of course it
ideas
would be.
for people. And I don't want to play into that. So it's in a way,
Why
so
do you
I guess you
think
could.
Well, historically,
Um,
it's true.
Mhm. I believe you because I don't know anything about history.
Well, historically, labor movements, with union busting, protest movements, the right often works in tandem with capital interests. So whatever policies that go forward to kind of curb extremism usually disproportionately are targeted on the left. So just historically speaking, that sentiment, that fear is not ungrounded. While that is true, a more heavy-handed approach to tackle right-wing extremism, I think, is needed. It's just we have to be careful in how whatever legislation or policies put forward, the language is catered specifically to that.
I guess okay. I don't like speculating, and so I think that's where this has kind
Yeah.
of
I love
detached
speculating.
for me. I hate it. I think it's so useless for my time and my brain. I think it's so silly.
Yeah.
And like I understand speculating to an extent, but I don't like the slippery slope arguments. I never have. It's like the COVID vaccine mandates. Everyone uses the slippery slope arguments for those too. And it just isn't effective for me. Like I just don't find it, I don't know, worthwhile. I spent too much time on WoW speculating about the next expansion pack and got disappointed too many times. I don't know.
You're right.
I get it. Wrath of the Lich King was
but,
rough. I mean,
it's like QAnon. It's like they're just speculating about what's going on. Like they don't know. They're just speculating, and I think it's good, but it's dangerous to a certain extent
Well,
because then you.
No,
Yeah.
your hesitation in that is correct, because the hesitation of trying to take action to do something is a stopgap measure to progress. The kind of fear that we have on the left of like, if they do this to the right, they're gonna like do it to us even more. While that's, like I said, not unfounded, we do still need to, like you said, not be too afraid to take some kind of action.
And I would use what Justin Trudeau did with the Canadian trucker convoy as an example of this, because everybody was
Exactly.
literally going off about, oh my God, if they freeze the bank accounts of the truckers, they're going to do that to me. Because historically, governments disproportionately wield that power against people who are leftists and believe in left-wing ideology. But that's not what happened. And basically, I saw all of the leftist discourse online turn into, everybody should shut the fuck up. Don't talk about this. Don't speculate. It's happening to the other people for once. Just let it happen.
Except for
Don't push
Pela
back.
V.
Oh God, I'm not sure
Yeah,
I
don't
want to
get me
know what he
started.
thought.
I mean, I understand. Like you should have empathy, like for the people that are being, shut off or whatever. I get that, but at the same time, like I think there's a logical amount of like hesitation and distrust, and then there's like, well, they're just going to make it so nothing political can be said on that platform. I think, America is such an interesting like dynamic. I just don't see that being a thing that could happen, because like even now people who are like saying some really fucked up shit are still getting away with it because they don't want to be called like fascist, social media, whatever.
well,
But they're
so
always
I
going to
can
be changing.
say
They're always going to be changing to skirt out the for-profit like censorship rules. You know what I mean? The right does this so well. What is it? Alt-right now? It's like, or what's going to be new left? I mean, come on. It's like, there's so always, I just feel so reactionary to me to be just like playing defense to like the symbols and be like, oh, okay, this is what it's changing to. Now we got to tamp this down. Like rather than just like fighting fascism head on face, in the face, and just taking it on and saying that this is ridiculous for these reasons.
So I can say just in terms of something I've noticed, maybe it seems like a very small thing, but again, this kind of like puts out alarm bells in my head. So like on Facebook, this is like a recent change within the last like 6 months, maybe, that you can't, you're discouraged from using pronouns in groups because saying
What
man.
platform was this?
Facebook.
This is on Facebook. So here I'll type it out in chat so you can see like the language. But it's like someone might type something like this: a man stalked me last week, and use
What are you talking
Hi-
about?
using
I'm not
hieroglyphs.
seeing
You have to
anything on there.
You have to look at my chat.
Can you?
That's
yeah,
so
if you look in the
weird.
chat. So this is a new thing. So it's like just people using pronouns, period. Or maybe the algorithm can detect a certain context that it's like not positive or something, because that's something you can detect, like positive or negative context. Groups can get flagged and then shut down for this, like automatically on Facebook. So people in groups are discouraged from using pronouns. at the certain point at which people have to use like an @ sign or a 3 to say like man or men when they're talking about like this man like stalked me or whatever, that's the point at which I start to get a little bit.
It's already been doing
concerned.
that for like a long time. My friend on Facebook, he's black and he talks about white people and he has to use like the emoji, the white symbol from now on
exactly.
because he's been, cut
right,
off.
because this is what we make fun of like in China, right? It's at a different level where it's like you have to talk about Winnie the Pooh or whatever, right? But like I don't know. I don't think that that's a good development. That makes me concerned that things are moving in that direction.
Yeah, but I don't know
Where we
why
have to start speaking in code.
Why on a capitalist platform that would make any sense though? Like what's
I think I can I can speculate on how that happened, which is that there's probably people saying like really graphically like anti-women sentiments, and so they started flagging that, and then to make it fair so that they don't get called out, they started making it like gender period, which is that's kind of the trend, right?
I mean, machine learning is going to overcome whatever like clever way people are going to try.
Yeah, exactly. And then like what happens at that point, right? So okay, this sounds it's like me saying this out loud sounds insanely alarmist, but there are a finite number of steps, right? So at the point where from like you have to start speaking in code, and then the algorithm like is sophisticated enough to detect that code, that's the point at which reversing that becomes like exponentially more difficult.
Yeah. And like as someone in chat points out, machine learning is just going to reproduce the bias in the training data.
Yeah.
Yeah, Facebook's a really weird example because like I was listening to interviews with Zuckerberg, and he thinks that Facebook actually has more power than nations. Because someone was asking him, like, how do you think about like a constitution and that kind of stuff? And he's like, oh, yeah, we actually have more power than a single nation because we span the globe and we have so many more. Like, he was talking about his nation state of Facebook being so much bigger than so many other countries. And it's like, holy shit.
I think he's probably right. Yeah.
That is so scary.
Yeah. And just looking at like key investors in the companies like Facebook and Twitter, like we brought up BlackRock earlier. Mm-hmm. BlackRock's like a $9 trillion investment firm. They have the wealth of like I think only China and America have a higher like annual GDP than that investment firm alone. So it's not just that like Facebook is its own nation. In like the metaphorical or analogous sense, it's that the people who are at the levers of power within these organizations, within these firms, also are bigger than other countries. Mm-hmm. It's just like the breaking up of these companies just is a necessity at this point.
Agreed. Totally agreed.
And they influence fragile nations like Myanmar.
All my contacts are on there. Use it for messaging.
Get rid of it. I did it, and it was the best decision I ever made.
What, Facebook?
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, Facebook. I'm not on it anymore.
I deleted Facebook. I got my parents to, or I think it was just my mom to delete hers, and everybody unanimously agreed it was a great
choice. You guys are hardcore.
Yeah, I deleted it.
I
2016. After Trump got elected, I was like, this is such trash, especially Facebook making money, hundreds of millions of dollars off of Russian disinformation. Like, why would I want to give them like that much time?
I get all my best memes from Facebook. I don't know if I can.
I just couldn't deal with my family anymore.
That's fair. But also, if you use TikTok, you're basically doing the Chinese equivalent of giving them data too. So.
Exactly.
All right, that's fine. Fuck it.
Delete it.
YOLO.
Delete that too.
I will enjoy my fucking dog memes, okay? It's just videos of dogs rolling in ponds and little puddles and getting dirty and their owners laughing their asses off. So, if you want to shit talk TikTok some more, I'll show you some of my likes because they're fucking great, all right?
But you can take my Attack on Titan episode breakdown videos when you pry it from my cold, dead hands.
I mean, it goes to us needing new companies in these areas that are actually collectively owned by the content creators. And in doing that, we're probably going to need to pay for these websites. You have to pay to access these ones. And that's a good thing because then they're not beholden to advertisers. So, it's like Google and Twitch and all this stuff being free is again, it's a crazy anomaly in time.
Well, I don't know about that because it'll be freemium. It'll be pay to access more information, free from ads, that kind of stuff. It'll still have a free version. Like we've moved to the freemium model for a lot of commodities. So I don't know if that's true, but
That's
interesting
because of
question.
ads.
What's that?
And that's because of ads, and I think he's saying to not have it commodified.
Oh, yeah. Okay, if I misunderstood, then I'm sorry. But an interesting question that came up earlier when we were talking about having universal access to a nationalized internet, or these platforms becoming actually public.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to give our personal information to access them?
That's what I was asking.
I mean, it's in the future. It probably will be, because it's just inevitable. I feel like,
because I think the obvious answer, because I've talked about this heavily, of nationalizing ISPs because how it would work is every home has fiber RAN. Ideal scenario, every home has fiber RAN to it. That's you can't sell a house that doesn't have plumbing, so it has to have fiber RAN to it. Once you move into your apartment, home, whatever, you call up your local municipally ran ISP provider, and they turn it on. You say, here's my registration number, here's my blah, 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 my information. They turn it on for you. What you do with it afterwards, that is a separate question entirely. The internet itself is just a tool. It's just a road that you go on. But the car you drive, the type of fuel you put in it, and what you do with it, that's an entirely separate question.
Yeah, and you also need to own your data. As if you're gonna nationalize this thing, and I think that should be where my data is stored and how it's stored is actually really important to me as a person, because Google having all this information on me, or Twitter and all this kind of stuff, I should be able to selectively say, hey, I want to remove my access, my data from you, because this is part of me. This is my private property. Let's use capitalist terms. It's my private property. My data is my own. I'm taking it from you.
Yeah, there's I think I want to say Elizabeth Warren. As much as I don't like her, I think Elizabeth Warren actually put forward a piece of legislation that got slapped down in the Senate about actual data rights. How you should be able to, exactly like you're saying, yeet your data from these platforms whenever you don't like what they're doing with it.
Exactly. I mean, because she's
had some amazing legislation. Yeah.
If you
she's good on
think
corruption.
about all the footprints that you're leaving in the internet as you go from site to site, you're creating an account, you're creating your username, your password is saved with them, and then now you're intrinsically tied to that fate of that website. Whether that website gets hacked, whether or not those people are actually using that personal information in a good way, that's actually that's up to you. That your well-being is tied to that, and you have no say on that, and that's ridiculous. We already have our personal information out there to thousands of websites.
Yeah. Well, also there's an interesting question of fraud or child sex crimes. If you pull your data from these sites where illicit activities are happening, and you use that and you pull it. Well, what right does the government, what avenues does the government have of pursuing crimes when your data, the trail of you being on these sites is gone from those sites now? So there's kind of a different question there that I don't have the answer to.
Yeah, it's a good question.
All right,
Yeah, we could probably wrap that
you
up.
heading out?
We've
Yeah.
been at it for
I gotta head
4
out.
fucking hours, dude. Damn.
I wish I
Here,
was
well, I'll
paid.
I'll just link my Twitter and chat. Everybody go follow me. I'm trying to build a
Hey.
huge following. Be on the site 24/7. So
Are you're on Twitch
Sell
as
out.
well, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
Socrates TV.
yeah.
Let me go ahead and do a Twitter follow. I think I'm doing that actually. There we go. Let's go around the horn and do shout outs. Socrates, you already let us off with your Twitter. I guess Amber, you're first on my screen, so go ahead.
I am on Twitch, DN Amber. I usually stream video games Monday and Friday, and then Thursday I'm here with you lovely folks, and I talk about science while I game. So you don't, have to listen to me talk the whole time about science.
All right, Greg, you're next.
I have a YouTube channel, of course. the peer dot review. It actually doesn't matter in my defense that I have a YouTube channel because nobody watches it anyway. So it could be privately hosted. So
Oh well, you say that now, but that could change, and it could change in a very, very short amount of time potentially. We'll see. Gremlo, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Gremlo on Twitch. I recently changed my Twitter handle to Gremlo as well, and I am live Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, and on Thursday nights with you guys, we do this. And yeah, I don't know if I have any. Oh, I have Hippy Dippy coming up this Sunday.
oh, nice, dude.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And if you guys have any ideas for a charity, I'm thinking of doing another one. Thinking of doing another 24-hour charity stream.
Very cool.
Ooh, yeah, actually, I'll think on that because I know I was thinking about the same thing since after your previous one, I got roped into another one for a good cause. Of course, it was another trans. I think it was the Transgender Law Center. That was another charity stream. Yeah, you were there, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, now I kind of like got the bug, so we might want to like collab on that.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's I don't know if you probably know about it, but Trans Lifeline.
Yeah, that was the one I did.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're
1K,
fantastic.
let's go.
That was good
Oh,
shit.
that's awesome. Wow, well done.
Yeah, Rain. That's another good one. Yeah, we could talk about it. All right, I guess I'll just round it out. I think most of you know who I am already. Twitch.tv/homozygote, spelled like the animal, not like owning two alleles of a gene. STEM Lord name, I know, but that's the point. Biology streamer in general, host this panel every Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern. The rest of the time, just like to mix it up, decent amount of COVID content. And apparently now I have to go figure out why the fuck Haas, who doesn't know that women have more than two holes, is now reviving Lysenkoism. That made no fucking sense, and I'm still kind of stun locked on that. So I'm gonna figure out what the fuck that's all about as soon as this ends.
Wait, Homozygote, I just want to say your name works on so many levels, and when I first went to your stream and saw the Satanist and LGBT tag, I was like, oh my god. Like I went to your stream before I was on the panel that first time, and I was like, holy shit, this is like 20 fucking levels of damn. Anyway.
Yeah, it's at least a triple entendre, and I usually try and like rep some Satanist attire. It's flipped, but it's a Hail Satan. So there you
If I
go.
wore that to work, I would be burned.
That's my official lab photo, actually. By the way, I'm wearing this
Oh my
shirt.
god,
awesome.
I'm jealous. I could never. I'd never get away with it. I would be locked out of the lab.
Yeah, well, thankfully, my colleagues really just don't give a shit because
He's trying to do
they're taking their
gene
masks
therapy to turn us into demons.
off. Yeah,
No,
Hillary
it's-
Clinton gave me the secret CRISPR gene therapy, brother. I'm going to turn on your demon genes, and we're all going to start smelling like sulfur. Prepare.
That's right.
No, I would get asked on the daily, like, why I love Satan or something like that. Like, so many people here don't even know that Satanists don't even, like, believe in Satan, that it's just a meme, pretty much. But, like,
Yeah, it depends on what sect, but that's a whole
well,
nother
yeah, of
discussion.
course. But the majority of Satanists are just atheist memeing. But
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out Satanic Temple, trying to give women in Texas satanic abortion rituals so they can actually get
hell
access
yeah,
to safe and
FDA
affordable
approval
abortion.
to the abortion pill by mail, baby.
Exactly.
I want to have a discussion one day on male birth control.
There is
Ooh.
one going into clinical
topic.
trials this year or next year.
Is that the
Hell yeah.
gel?
I think it's a pill.
Ooh. All right, yeah,
think.
let's
Let's
make
just
that another panel discussion then.
Wrap that up
sounds
into the
interesting.
antinatalist like discussion, and I can just swat them all down at the same time, make it real easy.
Hell
on
yeah,
me.
anti-natalist. Never met a Natalie I like. I stole that from Mythic Politics. I'm sorry, I can't take credit for that.
All right, everybody. Thank you for being here for almost a giant 4-hour chunk.
Easy.
That was a good discussion. I feel very satisfied with that. And Socrates, thank you for being the guest. The door is always open, so if you want to do more of these, help yourself.
Yeah, this is a ton of fun. Thank you so much for having me on. This is
Yeah.
awesome.
Enjoy your new place. Hope you
Yeah,
get
thank
the
you.
move done pretty quickly. It's a pain in the ass.
Hmm.
All right.
All right.
See y'all later.
Adios.
Thanks again.
Adios.
Take care.
Later, folks.
All right. You literally don't need to give away your personal information. They can socially engineer you. Yeah, that's true. That's totally true. yeah, I think there's so much information out there that people already have that. Yeah, I feel like it's already a thing. It's already a thing. The worst is already here, and all the information's in these companies' hands anyway. So at least with my Discord is all messed up. Dude, I don't know who you are, Noob Lord. Who are you? Are you still in chat? You do? You know who you are? That's good. I'm happy that you know who you are. All right. Thank you. I appreciate you. All right. Well, let's talk later. And oh shit, is it David? I feel like it's David. I'm gonna go with David. Oh well, hit me up. W2 pal. Oh shit, no way. Sick. Oh shit. Oh, okay, shit. It is David. What's up, dude? I didn't know it was you.